Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Amanda, an amateur writer and literature enthusiast. This is my series, Micro Appreciation, where we go into the absolutely nitty-gritty details to find what we like and what we maybe don't like as much. This is the third and final video covering The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, which is the first in this Wheel of Time series. If you have not seen my other videos, I do recommend that you see those first, because I will be referencing things I've said before, and I'll try not to repeat myself too much. So if you haven't seen those, please do, and then come back. And as always, as a standard disclaimer, there will be spoilers galore throughout this. It is basically just a video of spoilers along with my opinions. I haven't done any research besides seeing videos covering the TV series back when that was a popular topic. I don't remember very many details from the series, so it doesn't really spoil it too much. And my opinion so far has been mixed. I have both praise and critique, which I think is expected in any literature. If you disagree with me, you are welcome to do so in the comments. I don't mind an open discussion. And yeah, that's where we are. So let's get started. When we left off, Rand and Matt had just made their escape from the Four Kings, the inn in the Four Kings, the village, and has since then been dodging dark friends left and right. One of them, very notably, trying to kill them, while Rand was sick from as a reaction from using the power. And Rand had to stop Matt from killing her in turn. So they locked her in attack room and then made their escape. Chapter 34, The Last Village. Rand and Matt continue towards Caemlyn. The road is getting busier in part because the population is denser the closer they're getting to the capital, and because there are a lot of other travelers on the road. All of them going to Caemlyn to see the false dragon, Logain, who is about to be paraded before the population, before being presented to the queen. One and all, they had the travel-stained look of having walked a long way. Some had their eyes on their feet and a weary slump to their shoulders early as it was. Others had their gaze fixed on something out of sight ahead, something toward the dawn. Nice use of travel-stained. The boys have an encounter with some angry merchants who are competing for road space. The regular population is very unhappy with all of the strangers moving through their land, but it's good for the boys because it gives them the anonymity of the crowd. When night falls, they have reached yet another village, but they don't, and it has an inn, but they are no longer confident enough to perform, to earn themselves a bed, but they hang around because they're to catch their breath because they're just so tired. A man close by is checking the harness on his horse and cart, whilst there is a conversation taking place in front of the inn with a man and a cloaked figure. Rand can't hear what they're talking about, but he sees that the one man they see looks very nervous, adding very little to the conversation besides nods and worried gestures. The other one turns out to be a Fade, identifiable by his cloak. The inn sign went scree, scree, scree in the wind, but the dark cloak never stirred. And I don't like it. I am never going to like it, but it is what it is. At least Jordan is extremely consistent in this description. Unfortunately. The man who had previously been pretending to fix his harness questions the innkeeper about his apparent relation with this very suspicious individual. The innkeeper claims that he's his friend and that who was there to put a bounty on two troublemakers who stole, among other things, his heron-marked blade. The horse guy is not convinced, but he is. I just noticed that I had neglected to light my beautiful Halloween candle in honor of the season. So we're fixed now. It's all good. Let's continue. The horse guy is not convinced, but he's dismissed by the innkeeper because he's so strange. that he is planning on driving all night to get to Caemlyn himself to see the false dragon and taking advantage of the empty road. When the innkeeper goes away, Rand takes a chance and runs up and asks if they can hitch a ride, and surprisingly or not, the man agrees. An owl called, a mourner's cry, and the wind moaned like lost souls in the shadow. Nice use of mourner's cry. Eventually, the driver gets bored and starts to talk. He has a little monologue, which gives us plenty of information about Caemlyn and its queen. Apparently, Queen Margaise has an Aes Sedai as an advisor, which some believe is a bad idea. Some of them maliciously saying that she's the one who is secretly in charge, which is very in line with, the bigotry against Aes Sedai that we've already heard. The driver himself thinks that it's a very bad idea that they continue the tradition of sending the daughter heir to the throne to Tar Valon to get an Aes Sedai education, I guess, and the same sending the oldest son to train with warders. So we learn, of course, that the throne of Andor is passed down matrilineally. We also learn that Queen Margaise wasn't the one who was actually in line for the throne, but the actual heir, Tigraine, she's called, she disappeared before she could take the throne, along with the first prince, both of them disappearing in the Blight. And after that, there was this political battle between the different houses who might possibly inherit, and Margaise won. We also learned that the person who was married to Tigraine and would thus have been king consort, actually married Margaise before he died. And apparently that guy was involved somehow in the chopping of the tree in Carrion, which unleashed the Aiel War. But then he died after fathering Elaine and Gavin, who are both about to go to Tar Valon for their training, as has been a tradition for 3 millennia. That was a lot of information presented more cogently than I just did to you, so that is very well done on Jordan. Rand drifts off to sleep and has a normal nightmare, and when he wakes up, they are in Caemlyn. Chapter 35, Caemlyn. Caemlyn, the capital of Andor, is shown to have grown outside its majestic white walls. Inns thrust their upper stories above the tile roofs of houses, and squat warehouses, broad and windowless, shouldered against them all. Nice use of thrust and shouldered. Berlin could have vanished into it without being noticed, and Whitebridge swallowed up 20 times over with hardly a ripple. It's a very nice description, and it's very interesting to see how Rand's frame of reference keeps evolving along the journey. 1,000 stories had painted cities in his mind, the great cities of kings and queens, of thrones and powers and legends, and Caemlyn fit into those mind-deep pictures as water fits into a jug. It's a fantastic description. I love it. Calves bawled, cattle lowed, geese honked, chicken clucked, goats bleated, sheep baaed, and people bargained at the top of their lungs. A wall of noise funneled them toward the gates of Caemlyn. Nice use of funneled. But the farmer tells them that Caemlyn is so grand because the palace in the inner city were built by Ogier after the breaking of the world, which makes it very old indeed. The boys are overwhelmed with the noise and the sheer number of people who are struggling or waiting to get into the city. While Rand sees safety in numbers in all of these people, Mand only sees a great deal of potential dark friends. And he is still being very pessimistic about any of the others being alive at this point. Whatever their ages, a lot of the crowd pushing toward the gates had a travel-worn look. Rickety carts and tired horses, clothes wrinkled from many nights of sleeping rough, dragging steps and weary eyes. But weary or not, those eyes were fixed on the gate as if getting inside the walls would strip away all their fatigue. It's very relatable again. They're getting a burst of energy when there's the end in sight. They get inside the walls and the boys are let off the cart. The farmer, more observant than he appeared, or perhaps just as observant as he appeared, advises Rand to sell the sword or otherwise get rid of it, because it doesn't, and it's right insofar that it marks him out. Matt did not get any sleep, apparently, being kept awake by the monologue, and he is very grumpy when Rand decides that they should go to the Queen's Blessing, which is the inn that Tom recommended to them in his final moment. Rand is also nearing the end of his rope, about being worried and about being the only one who tries to see a solution. And he just begs for a little cooperation from Matt, who is still aware enough to apologize and say he's just so tired and he just wants to go home, which, why wouldn't you? The void eluded him despite Pam's teaching. His eyes drew the city into it, which is another fantastic description and great application of the void. As they try to find the inn, Rand notices that a lot of people are wearing white or red cockades, and many of those who wear swords either has a red or white wrapping on their swords. He doesn't know what it's about, but he realizes this would be a good way to hide the heron, and there are even pieces of fabric for sale, so he buys one. And since they have pretty much no money, he buys the cheaper option, which is the red. Eventually, they find the inn, which is kept by a man named Master Gill. They tell him that, or Rand tells him that Tom sent them, and then they show Tom's instruments for proof, which is, I guess, why they couldn't have sold them during the way, though that was never brought up. Gil accepts this proof of acquaintance, but he doesn't believe that Tom is dead, because apparently he's very good. He's very good at surviving, I guess. Gil assumes that Tom was helping them because they were in trouble with Aes Sedai because of Tom's nephew, and Rand has to reassure him that they don't know how to use the one power, that's not the kind of trouble they were in. Saying that there was even an Aes Sedai helping them at one point. And Master Gill in turn gives us Tom's backstory. He used to be a court bard, which Tom himself claimed when he was first introduced. And apparently he also used to be closer to Queen Morgase than was proper. She was not happy when Tom took off to help his nephew, and even less so that he was meddling with Aes Sedai business when he did it. Tom apparently had some choice words for the Queen, which resulted in an arrest warrant, which also showed that the Captain General Gareth Bine. I'll investigate. Is it Brine or Bine? I don't remember. Cannot seem to remember whether it's Bine or Brine. Let's investigate. Gareth Brine. Yeah, and Gareth Brine, who never fails at anything, failed to arrest Tom. And here we also get a useless comment about how women never forget anything. Very unnecessary, as most of the other comments about the different genders. Chapter 36, Web of the Pattern. Gil feeds the boys and asks for their story in return, and Rand tells a modified version of it, excluding Trollocs and Fades, because he doesn't want to come across as someone who believes in storybook characters. But he's very nice in that he doesn't want to undersell the danger, and that Master Gil might face troubles for helping them, which is very nice. So he says that there are dark friends after him, which Master Gil doesn't really take as seriously as he should. He takes everything in stride, and he also advises Rand not to go to Eleda, which is the Queen's advisor's Aes Sedai, as a substitute to Moraine. Maybe if you didn't have a connection to Tom, she'd winkle it out, and then where would you be? Nice use of winkle out, and they can't go to the city guards for the same reason. This innkeeper, like mostly every other innkeeper, has a pseudo-adversarial relationship with his cook. Complaining about it reveals to us that the city is practically overrun with rats, which is explained by the increased number of people around. But we know that rats are like the eyes of the Dark One, so it's notable. He leaves them he goes tend to his business, and Matt is annoyed when Rand has all this time that Rand has been trying to motivate him to keep going. He said that they have to get to Caemlyn. And now that they're in Caemlyn and it's void of Moraine, then he moves the goalpost to going to Tarvalon if she doesn't show up. And now Matt even suspects Gil of being a dark friend, because only a dark friend wouldn't be nervous about other dark friends, right? So we already know that there is something seriously wrong with Matt, so this is just another symptom. When they are finished, they are shown to a little attic room. A dormer window pierced the slanting outer wall, with a bed on either side of it and pegs beside the door for hanging their belongings. Matt claims a bed, and declaring that all is lost, more or less. So Rand leaves to find Gil to make plans for what to do if Moraine doesn't come. But he can't find him. While he's searching, we learn that the city guard has a habit of coming checking that everything is all right. And he tells us that the tensions are running high in the city. When he can't find Gil, Rand asks a maid for if there's somewhere where he can be alone, and she directs him to the library. In the library, he is astonished to meet Loyal, who is an Ogier. Rand at first mistakes him for a Trolloc, which most people in Caemlyn have done before, which is why Loyal is hiding out at the inn. I think that it's a hint contradictory, that people in this area of the world think that Trollocs are myths, and yet they persecute Loyal for being a Trolloc. I mean, they should sooner assume that he's an Ogier, because they live in a city which was once upon a time built by Ogier. So why does Trolloc come to mind first? But it's not a huge thing. It's just a little. I've not been super happy about how widespread the belief of Trollocs being made up. It feels like that is a belief that is too widespread for this world. But it's fine, I guess. I'm also sort of torn on Ogier themselves. I don't like the word because it's too close to ogre, whom they are nothing alike. The species in character, they seem to be like a mix of Tolkien's elves and dwarves, because they really like to build pretty things with stone, but they prefer trees. Their other main quality is that they are extremely long-lived, and so they like to take a long time doing things, and their general view of humans is that they are generally hasty. Loyal is a young Ogier, being 90, and he got tired waiting on the elders of his steading to decide whether he would be allowed to travel the world. So he left without permission and has been traveling around for a few years. He's a very well-read Ogier, and he wanted to see for himself all of the cities and groves that were described in his books. The groves are trees planted by Ogier when they were to ease the homesickness of Ogier when they were away from the studying. So far, Loyal has found that the world is very different from what he expected. The cities now have different names, and the groves are gone or made into private property for royalty. Rand asks whether the groves are like the Avendesora, which is like the legendary Tree of Life. Loyal says that Rand in particular should know better, because he's an Ailman, which we have heard several times by now. Loyal then corrects himself after his assumption and apologizes, and Rand, not really knowing what to say, says that the two rivers where he's from used to be called Manetheren, which Loyal does recognize. There was a very fine grove there. Your pain sings in my heart, Rand al'Thor. We could not come in time. Loyal then asks what brings Rand so far from home, and Rand has felt very alone with Matt in his moods, so he tells Loyal the real story, only managing to stop himself before he tells him about the dreams. Matt was so drawn in on himself, feeding his fears on his own suspicions, that he was no good for talking. I really like that expression, that he feeds his fears on his suspicion. It's very poetic and says a lot. Loyal, after hearing the story, Loyal responds by saying that Rand is a Taveran, which is a person whom the wheel shapes the weave around. Simply that they are people who affect the destiny of everyone around them. Because of this, Loyal asks whether he can travel with Rand, but Rand declines because he knows that they're in so much danger and he doesn't want to afflict that on an innocent person. I mean, it will be dangerous just to associate with him, so. Which Loyal is, nice enough to accept. Chapter 37, The Long Chase, which is the last chapter with Nynaeve's point of view. The three, Moraine, Lan, and Nynaeve are following Moraine's fix on Perrin's coin. They were briefly interrupted as Perrin temporarily lost his coin. Though it doesn't change their plan, they still know roughly where they were going, and Moraine knows instantly when he receives it back. And we get another dose of Moraine's overconfidence. She could feel the Aes Sedai smile even in the dark. He has regained the coin wisdom, all will be well. She lay down on her blankets with a sigh, and almost at once was breathing deep in slumber. And I will say again, that just because a plan works out, does not make it a good plan. I will die on this hill. Fight me. Now they have caught up with the Children of the Light, and Lan has located their target to be in the center of their camp. Lan even says this one line. The children should not be interested in a village boy unless there was something to make them suspicious. And oh dear, I wonder what could have made them suspicious. Maybe it's the fucking coin Moraine forced on him. Oh well. How are you going to free him? It was not until he glanced at her that she realized how much assurance there had been in her that he could march into the middle of 200 men and come back with the boy. Oh, that's really cute. She rationalizes her high opinion of Lan with him being a warder and not her special Superman. They decide that the diversion is in order. Nynaeve is to loosen the ropes on the horses so that the White Cloaks will have to spend time fetching the horses, and then it will take them longer to pursue when they escape. And the only thing Lan has to say to make her comply with his plan is to compliment on her stalking skills. Lan also shares that he has observed that there are wolves around. So I guess that they have been following, waiting for an opportunity or something, I guess. Nynaeve sneaks to the horses. She does come across a couple of guards, but she soon realizes that they aren't really watching for anything. They're just going through the motions. The horses along the picket lines, there were more than one row, were barely realized masses in the darkness, heads down. Nice use of barely realized masses. Nynaeve half cuts through, line after line, and eventually she spots Bella, which makes her assume that Egwene is there as well. And then she has a kind of premonition that if they are to successfully escape, then the boy and Egwene each need a horse to ride. She frees Bella and one of the White Cloak horses. And all of this seems to correspond to her ability to, read the weather, like wisdom. Some wisdoms can do. And, Moraine says things about the wheel weaving and stuff like that. So I said I do have some ability to predict the future. And all of a sudden, lightning splits the sky. The crash of riven earth fought the thunderstroke. Nice use of riven and thunderstroke. And then the wolves attack. Chapter 38, Rescue. The pair have suffered greatly in captivity, especially Perrin. The White Cloaks are certain that they are both dark friends, which makes them below all compassion. Bayar keeps up the physical abuse and keeps explaining to them how badly they'll be tortured when they reach Amador. This night is different, because Bayar has decided that keeping prisoners are slowing them down, and they do have an appointment to keep in Caemlyn. And he knows that Bornhald is torn between getting to Caemlyn in time and letting the questioners question Perrin about this phenomenon with the wolves. So To solve this dilemma for Bornhald, he offers Perrin a sharp rock, which they can use to sever their bonds and run away. Perrin, however, realizes how unlikely it is for Bayer to offer to let them go, and he understands that he guesses that this is more likely an excuse to give Bayer an excuse to kill them as they attempt to flee. His response to Bayer is interrupted by a message from the wolves saying that help is coming and that Elias is alive. I find it slightly strange that this is the first communication from the wolves. If they have been following behind, they can communicate over quite long distances. So it's strange that they haven't been like tried to reassure Perrin until now, like keeping his hopes up or something, promising that they will help if they can or anything. But it doesn't really matter. Bayer sees that Perrin is experiencing hope in some measure, so he reconsiders his offer. He looked into Bayer's eyes. The shadowed hollows of the man's eye sockets made them appear to stare at him from dark caves, and he saw death decided. But this is when Lan strikes, first taking out one guard and then the other. Suddenly one of the guards vanished. 1 minute there were two dim shapes, the next the night swallowed one of them. The second guard turned, the beginning of a cry on his lips. But before the first syllable was uttered, there was a solid chunk, and he toppled over like a felled tree. Lan then incapacitates Bayer and frees Perrin and Egwene, telling them they take cloaks from the fallen White Cloaks, and Perrin recovers his axe from Bayer, because how could any of the boys be without their signature weapon? They put on the cloaks and walk out of the camp. Then, no one stops them, and then everyone is distracted by lightning striking and things catching fire and general confusion. The lightning flickered fitfully and was gone. Echoes of thunder rolled across the sky before they too faded away, which I like very much. The descriptions of magic in this book is generally very good, as a rule. The three of them get back to Moraine, and when Moraine says that Nynaeve hasn't come back yet, Lan spins around like he's going to go get her. And Moraine tells him no, and she invokes all of his titles and reminds him of his oath. So he's obviously super smitten, and Moraine knows it, obviously. And she's also obviously willing to sacrifice Nynaeve, which is interesting. You kind of have to wonder why. Might it be because Lan is so smitten? And I'm not implying that Moraine is jealous in any way. I'm just saying that she does rely on his loyalty a lot. So it would surely be inconvenient for her if he were to decide that he wants to go off with someone else. It doesn't come to an edge because Nynaeve crashes in, riding Bella with the other horse in tow. She slid down off Bella, but as she started toward the Eamonfielders, Lan caught her arm and she stopped short, staring up at him. Ah, well, Dapple, the leading wolf, her final message to Perrin is a promise that they will meet again sometime. More a feeling than words, it sighed with the promise of a meeting foreordained, with anticipation of what was to come, with resignation to what was to come, all streaked in layers. It hung haunting in his mind long after awareness of the wolves winked out. So we're still not very consistent on whether they use words or not. I'm still convinced that they do use words. Just having a word for the Dark One still rings to me that, yeah, they do have basic language. But Elias claimed otherwise before, so right away, before they take time to make a camp to regroup. And Nynaeve sees to Perrin and Egwene's injuries. Perrin taking his top off reveals horrific injuries from where he's been kicked daily by Bayer, which is really, it successfully puts a very hard edge on their captivity. And then Nynaeve applies an ointment to the bruises, and which basically adds days and days of healing to them. And even she is startled, so she has obviously unknowingly used the power rather than just an ointment. And Perrin asks about Brandon Matt, which makes Nynaeve reveal her frustration with Moraine's confidence in her plans. Nynaeve began stuffing her vials and pots back into her bag, jamming each one in as if she were thrusting it through a barrier. She says they're all right. She says we'll find them. In Caemlyn, she says. She says it's too important for us not to, whatever that means. She says a great many things. Well described, and I do sympathize with all of it. Moraine should be taken down quite a few pegs. She is way too confident in her plans. But I don't feel like the narrative agrees with Nynaeve here, like I do. It feels to me like the narrative thinks that the plan with the coins was a good one, which it was not. It just happened to work out in this case. This is my, like I said, this is my hill. I have staked my claim. Do what you want with that. Anyway, Nynaeve notices that Perrin's irises have turned yellow. Did I mention that? I don't think, maybe I mismentioned that. I'm guessing that it happened when he embraced the wolves when Hopper was killed trying to save them. Moraine overhears this conversation and she talks to herself again. And I find that habit becomes more annoying every time she does it because it comes across as exposition. There was no foretelling this. Moraine spoke as if to herself. Her eyes seemed to look at something beyond him. Something ordained to be woven. Or a change in the pattern? If a change, by what hand? The wheel weaves as a wheel wills. It must be that. Moraine obviously knows what this is about, and that nothing can be done about it. But she offers no explanation to Perrin, which is completely obnoxious. Thankfully, Lan steps in because he also knows about this. And he asks Perrin whether it happened spontaneously or if there was an intermediary. And Perrin tells Lan about Elias. Lan reveals that they knew each other because Elias used to be a warder. Oh no, what a great surprise. I never would have guessed. He also seems to disapprove that the Red Aja wanted to gentle Elias. He explains that there are factions in Tervalin where different Ajas disagree on the best way to fight the Dark One. When Perrin asks, Lan also explains that this power with the wolves has nothing to do with the Dark One. What he says exactly is, it was old and long lost before the Dark One was found. Which is like, huh? The Dark One was found? When? How? Why? By whom? So what we know about the Dark One is that he was bound at the moment of creation by the Creator, and then some indeterminate time later he was found. What was he doing before then, I wonder? Lan seems to agree that the boys are Ta'veren, though he doesn't use that word, because it would be such a coincidence that Perrin, who has the ability, would just randomly bump into someone else who can teach him about it in the middle of nowhere. So it might be that the Dark One has grown strong enough to effect this change. Lan also seems extremely mistakenly confident in Moraine's ability, and I really hope that he is disabused at some point. Not just because I think that Moraine is very extremely annoyingly arrogant. I think that would be very interesting character development for Lan. Lan finally ponders whether all of these things marks the ending of an age, or even the ending of time itself. Suddenly he grinned, but his grin was as dark as a scowl. His eyes sparkled merrily, laughing at the foot of the gallows. But that's not for us to worry about, eh, blacksmith? We'll fight the shadow as long as we have breath, and if it overruns us, we'll go under biting and clawing. Which is pretty much Lan's character motivation in a nutshell. And that is the last of Perrin's point of view chapters, and it's really unfortunate because I don't at all like his portrayal in the rest of the book. I'll tell you when we get to those parts, but it's like the subtleties have just noped out of the building. It's really frustrating. Chapter 39, Weaving the Web. And we are back to Rand's perspective for the rest until the very end of the book. He is preparing to go out to see Logain as he is paraded through the streets on the way to the palace. Matt is not coming along, deciding to stay holed up in the room after being nasty about Loyal for no reason. His behavior has become bad enough that Rand considers trying to ask a wisdom comparable person to come have a look at him, if such a person would even come. With tempers being what they are in the city, and with white cloaks about, no one would want to do anything that might get them accused of dealing with the One Power. On his way out, Gil lets him know that someone has been asking for them by name in the city, which is a beggar who is half mad. And it's a bit strange that Rand does not think about the madman that was asking for them in Whitebridge. We also see that Gil has hired extra muscle to watch the inn. Langwing's ear twitched when Rand reached the mouth of the alley, but he never took his disinterest off the street. Really dangerous fighters in this book, like Lan, for example, are often described as being deceptively disinterested, which I find interesting. I don't know if that's a common trait of dangerous swordsmen. In this book it is, I guess. The worrisome tension is between royalists who wear red and people who wear white, who think that Morghase's bad governance and her association with Aes Sedai is responsible for everything going wrong. Like the long winter, the slow spring, everything is Queen Morghase's fault, which is interesting. The reason that the red cloth was cheaper when Rand chose which to buy is because the white is overwhelmingly more popular. So Rand is exposed, in danger of being attacked when he's out and about, but also Gil being so loyal himself, like his inn is called the Queen's Blessing. He might not have helped if Rand had worn the wrong colors. Rand decides to head for the inner city, hoping that maybe he might even catch a glimpse of Queen Morghaze as well as Logain. The inner city was built on hills, and much of what the Ogier had made still remained. Where streets in the new city mostly ran every which way in a crazy quilt, here they followed the curves of the hills as if they were a natural part of the earth. Which sounds very good. It's kind of hard for me to picture, but it still sounds good. Abruptly he was swept around a bend, and there was the palace. The streets, even following the natural contours of the land, had been laid out to spiral in on this gleeman's tale of pale spires and golden domes and intricate stonework traceries, with the banner of Andor waving from every prominence, a centerpiece for which all the other vistas had been designed. I mean, it really seems like this culture has never experimented with other forms of government than royalty, which is just, an observation, world-building observation, I guess. Kind of random to have it right here, but anyway. The security around the palace is tight because the guards are aware of the rising tensions, and anyone could see that the streets are packed with white brandishing people. Rand claims a spot and waits, but he is spotted by the beggar, who is heralded by a ripple in the crowd. The ripple meandered through the crowd, drawing closer to the edge of the street as it came. No one seemed to hesitate in letting it go where it wanted, even if that meant losing a good spot for viewing, as the crowd flowed back in on itself behind the passing. So very nice use of meandered. The beggar is revealed to be a filth-covered person in rags, who immediately sets his sight on Rand. He could feel the beggar's eyes, like greasy water on his skin. Nice use of greasy water. Rand instinctively runs away, driven both by the beggar's attention and by fear of being attacked. As he runs, he gets himself lost in the streets, and he doesn't want to risk going back to the, parade road for fear of being spotted by the beggar again. Rather than to give up on seeing the false dragon, he starts looking for another vantage point, and he eventually spots a wall from which he can see the entrance to the palace, where Logain must pass. He decides to climb it and sees that it is surrounding a garden, and it's also perfect to see. And it's just in time for Logain's arrival. There's a grand procession of warriors and musicians, and then a wagon with a cage with Aes Sedai with their full focus on the cage. Between the wagon and the footmen, and to either side, rode a dozen warders, their cloaks swirling and tangling the eye. If the Aes Sedai ignored the crowd, the warders scanned it as if there were no other guards but they. Before this, the only Aes Sedai we've seen is Moraine, and Lan is the only warder, so it's interesting to see others of the same assumed excellence, especially that because there's many of them at once. Rand is affected by seeing Logain, who does not seem to be cowed in the slightest. He held himself erect, head high, and looked over the crowd as if they had come to do him honor. And wherever his gaze swept, there the people fell silent, staring back in awe. When Logain's eyes left them, they screamed with redoubled fury, as if to make up for their silence, but it made no difference in the way the man stood, or in the silence that passed along with him. As the wagon rolled through the palace gates, he turned to look back at the assembled masses. They howled at him, beyond words, a wave of sheer animal hate and fear, and Logain threw back his head and laughed as the palace swallowed him. Which is a fantastic description and characterization, and I do hope that there is more of Logain. I do have vague memories of Rand searching him out in the series. I don't remember when, but not that the series is very representative of the books. There's no more of Logain in this book, anyway. When the moment is over, Logain wonders aloud why there were Aes Sedai, watching him, and he is startled when he hears his rhetorical question being answered by a girl, and he's so surprised that he falls off the wall down into the garden. Chapter 40, The Web Titans. And I must say that this is my absolute favorite chapter in this book. We get so much information, we're introduced to so many new characters, and it's so smooth that it's not overwhelming, and there is very little exposition. Rand is also put in a high-pressure situation, and he handles himself well, while still sticking to his very well-established character. It's fantastic. I love it. And Rand comes to in the garden with a splitting headache, nausea, and the world spinning. He was in a garden or a park. A slate-paved walk meandered by, through flowering bushes not 6 feet away, while a white stone bench beside it and a leafy arbor over the bench for shades. Another nice use of meandered. He abruptly remembers the girl who had been sitting in a tree, who is now coming toward him. A deep blue velvet cloak lined with pale fur rested on her shoulders, its hood hanging down just behind to her waist with a cluster of silver bells at the peak. They jingled when she moved. A silver filigree circlet held her long red-gold curls, and delicate silver rings hung at her ears, while a necklace of heavy silver links and dark green stones he thought were emeralds lay around her throat. Her pale blue dress was smudged with bark stains from her tree climbing, but it was still silk and embroidered with painstakingly intricate designs, the skirt slashed with inserts the color of rich cream. A wide belt of woven silver encircled her waist, and velvet slippers peeked from under the hem of her dress. It's a very nice description, though this is not at all my favorite kind of fantasy dress, the slashed dress. And I realize that it's not just fantasy dress, it's historical too. It's the kind of dress I dislike most seeing in fantasy, I guess is a better way to put that. He was so enmeshed in worrying whether or not he had gotten himself into trouble, whether or not she was someone who could and would call the Queen's guards even on a day when they had other things to occupy them, that it took him quite a few moments to see past the elaborate clothes and lofty attitude to the girl herself. She was perhaps 2 or 3 years younger than he, tall for a girl and beautiful, her face a perfect oval framed by that mass of sunburst curls, her lips full and red, her eyes bluer than he could believe. She was completely different from Egwene in height and face and body, but every bit as beautiful. He felt a twinge of guilt, but told himself that denying what his eyes saw would not bring Egwene safely to Caemlyn one whit faster. True. I like Rand being rational, and this is also such a main character description that she must be central in the story later on. She is accompanied by a boy who looks to be her older brother, and he's not given such a glorious description, but it's fair enough, I guess. Rand is still dazed, so he can be excused from not realizing that Elaine and Gavin have the same names as the daughter heir and her brother. It's also fine that he doesn't notice it, that their names are spelled weird. Not as weird as Matt with one T or Elias with a Y, but still. It is doubly annoying for me, the name spellings, because I will have to change every single one of them when I do the subtitles for this video. I wish Jordan would have thought of that. And I do have a feeling that the name spellings are for a reason, though I am not thrilled about the reason I predict. It is immediately clear that Elaine was the driving force in trying to get a look at Logain even when their mother had told them to stay in their rooms. Rand realizes that he shouldn't be trifling with people of this rank, and he tries to leave, but he fails because he's still dizzy. Elaine takes charge, checking Rand's head for injuries, and she produces paraphernalia from her dress that is more suitable to a wisdom than a noblewoman. Gavin smiled at him as she worked, a calming smile, as if he too expected Rand to jerk away and maybe even run. She's always finding stray cats and birds with broken wings. You are the first human being she has had to work on. He hesitated, then added, "Do not be offended. I'm not calling you a stray. It was not an apology, just a statement of facts." Which is such good characterization of someone who is accustomed to being obeyed and interpreted in the best light. And this part is also really good because there's so much information conveyed in discussions between the siblings and what they say when talking to Rand. There's a lot of establishing information without doing it in exposition, as Elaine tends to Rand's scraped palms. Listening to them, Rand eventually gets an idea, like a horrible creeping suspicion about who they are, and eventually finally asks who their mother is, and he learns that indeed she is the Queen of Andor. "The Queen," Rand muttered, shock spreading through him in waves of numbness. For a minute he thought his head was going to begin spinning again. Don't attract any attention. Just fall into the Queen's garden and let the daughter heir tend to her cuts like a hedge doctor. He wanted to laugh and knew it for fringes of panic. Here, I appreciate that Jordan didn't use any of the words belonging to the Hysteria family. I disapprove of the use of that word, and I appreciate Jordan demonstrating that it's not necessary. If Jordan at some point does use that word and it reserves it for describing a woman in an altered emotional state, I will be very disappointed. Rand again tries to go over the wall and is again failing to catch his balance. The siblings are surprised that Rand didn't know who they were by where they are. Gavin, who I assume is amused, says that the least Rand can do in exchange for being tended by Elaine is to give his name. So Rand does and adds where he's from, and Gavin knows about the 2 rivers. Rand looked around at him sharply. There had been a note of surprise in the young man's voice, and Rand caught some of it still on his face when he turned. Gavin replaced it with a pleasant smile so quickly, though, that he almost doubted what he had seen. Gavin's description of the 2 rivers is like a short ramble about their major exports, followed by a stray thought that Elaine should choose her husband from there, because they are known to be stubborn people, and she needs someone stubborn to slow her down, I guess. But the scene is interrupted by the arrival of another young man. The young man who stood there was the handsomest man Rand had ever seen, almost too handsome for masculinity. He was tall and slender, but his movements spoke of whipcord strength and a sure confidence. Dark of hair and eye, he wore his clothes, only a little less elaborate in red and white than Gavin's, as if they were of no importance. One hand rested on his sword hilt, and his eyes were steady on Rand. I'm not thrilled about the description. It's quite a common description of if a man is too attractive, that makes him less masculine. But I guess it's not too surprising from an author who is obviously very preoccupied with gender roles. Like, I mean, in this book, there's been quite a few inns described in this book, and every one of them has been run by a man with female serving maids and a female cook. So much so that I'm guessing this is the assumed standard for all inns in this world, which is, not too surprising, but when you think about it, it's a bit strange. It's like those games, like, oh god, a really big throwback to anyone who played Theme Hospital when that came out. I love that game so much. But like in Theme Hospital, all of the doctors were male and all of the nurses female. It sort of feels somewhat like that. Anyway, this man is Galadried, who is Elaine's and Gavin's half brother, who was not mentioned in the introduction by, the farmer who brought them to Caemlyn. But Rand has learned since then that he is apparently well liked by both of the factions, the rising tension in the city. But Elaine obviously does not like him and tries to send him on his way. Galad gave Gavin a rueful look. At one and the same time, it seemed to ask for help, while saying that Elaine was too headstrong to be helped. Rude, even if it might be true. He does leave, however, and Elaine proclaims hatred of him for being vile and full of envy, and Gavin protests, saying that Galad doesn't know the meaning of envy. It will be interesting to see which one of them is right. However, both of them agree that Galad will immediately raise an alarm, and so they try to figure out how to get Rand out of the garden before they arrive. It is, however, too late, and we are treated to a growl from Elaine as well. Rand again tries to break for the wall, but they are surrounded by guards. Elaine and Gavin both put themselves between the guards and Rand, to protect him. While the thud of boots and the creak of bowstrings still hung in the air, one of the soldiers, with a golden knot of an officer on his shoulder, shouted, "My lady, my lord, down quickly." Very nice description of still hung in the air. Elaine berates the officer for bearing steel in her presence, threatening that Gareth Bryne will have something to say about that. And Gareth Bryne is obviously the top military officer, so this threat works on some of the soldiers, but not all. Rand could count the bows that had not been lowered. The muscles of his stomach tensed, as though they could stop a broadhead shaft at 20 paces. Galad does lose some points, since he apparently said that he apparently described Rand as a dirty peasant, like armed and dangerous who needs to be dealt with. Elaine repeats that Rand is her guest, and Rand notices some tension between Elaine and this officer. The officer who probably thinks that Elaine is too accustomed to getting away with things because of her position. But in this one case, he has every excuse to put Rand in prison until they can determine what danger he poses, if any. Elaine's solution is for all three of them to be brought before the queen, which would apparently be disadvantageous for the officer. But Elaine refuses to be separated from her guests, and at first it seems that she has won, like she has put the officer in an impossible situation. However, another soldier appears with a message from the queen, which is an order to present both her children and the intruder to her. Hearing this, Elaine is abruptly concerned with her appearance, and we remember that she has been climbing trees when she had been told to stay in her room. Rand is feeling very unlucky, with good reason. He then abruptly notices the garden, which is flourishing, as opposed to every other piece of greenery we've had it described to us in this book. He can't resist making a whispered comment about it, and the siblings explain that it's Aleida, the Aes Sedai, who keeps this piece of earth flourishing, and we learn that Elaine, at least, doesn't think it's right that they have this privilege when the rest of the world is still, struggling. But this little side note makes Elaine gather herself, and she says that everything will be fine as long as Rand conducts himself properly and follows her lead. Rand wished he could share her confidence. It would have helped if Gavin had seemed to have it as well. Yeah, Gavin has been there. He knows how this usually goes. They are brought to the palace, somewhere in the palace, and Rand is obviously taken with all of the luxury. But even in his astonishment, he seems to notice, he reacts to the fact that he only sees one cat. This makes him prematurely, in my opinion, he assumes that just because there's just one cat, therefore there are no rats in the palace while the city is overrun. And that seems, as I said, seems very flimsy evidence for that conclusion. But it turns out to be true, because Eleda keeps the rats away. Finally, they arrive. At least it isn't the Grand Hall. Gavin laughed unsteadily. I never heard that Mother commanded anyone's head cut off from here. He sounded as if he thought she might set a precedent. Wow, thanks, Gavin. The officer makes an attempt to remove Rand's sword, and Elaine reminds him that guests of the royal family are allowed to wear swords even in the presence of the queen, and she sort of dares the officer to call her a liar by insisting on removing the sword, which he doesn't do. He does not call this bluff. She is probably going to be a very good politician one day. They enter the room, they bow and kneel and everything, and we get a fantastic description of Margase, who is a very beautiful and very impressive woman. Then we get a slightly worse description of Eleda and an even shorter one of Gareth Bryan. I am noticing that there is slightly more effort in describing the female characters, but that is also a way too little evidence to make a conclusion of right now. Premature, as it were. Margase begins by admonishing her children, Elaine for disobeying, and then Gavin for not stopping her, because his role in the future will be to be his sister's advisor and hopefully a tempering presence, it seems. Elaine does assume all of the blame for going out to see Logain, which is good of her. We do learn here also that the siblings they're set to travel to Tarvalin at the same time as Logain to begin their instructions. And I thought, when I read this, this departure, either that departure or just Logain's arrival, had something to do with why Bornhald had to get to Caemlyn, but that's not confirmed in this book. And then during this correction of Elaine, Eleda joins in to remind Elaine how rough her education in Tarvalin is going to be. Eleda is the second Aes Sedai that we have described to us in this book, and Moraine does compare very much favorably. Rand stared at her. She had to be Eleda, the Aes Sedai. Suddenly, he was glad he had not come to her for help, no matter what her aja. A sternness far beyond Moraine's radiated from her. He had sometimes thought of Moraine as steel covered with velvet. With Eleda, the velvet was only an illusion. Margase then turns her attention to Rand, and Elaine launches into her defense of Rand, saying that as queen, she will need to interact with subjects from all of her nation. And Rand is a very loyal subject from the Two Rivers. Margase very aptly argues that the Two Rivers do not consider themselves to be subjects of Andor, that they don't see any royal guards, and they don't even have taxes collected from them. Eleda then approaches Rand, commenting, also adding her opinion, that Rand does not look like anyone from the Two Rivers. Rand asserts that though his father was from the Two Rivers, his mother was an outlander. Eleda is then able to somehow suss that his sword is a heron-marked one, even though the heron is covered. This information makes everyone freak out. Those last few words acted on the chamber as if she had announced the Dark One. Leather and metal creaked behind Rand, boots scuffling on the marble tiles. From the corner of his eye he could see Talonvor and another of the guardsmen backing away from him to gain room, hands on their swords, prepared to draw, and from their faces prepared to die. In 2 quick strides, Gareth Bryan was at the front of the dais, between Rand and the Queen. Even Gavin put himself in front of Elaine, a worried look on his face and a hand on his dagger. Elaine herself looked at him as if she were seeing him for the first time. Morghese did not change expression, but her hands tightened on the gilded arms of her throne. And this is another example of excellent world building, seeing characters react to information rather than having it delivered to us. Morghese argues that Rand seems to be way too young to have earned a Heron Mark blade, but Gareth Bryan states that the sword belongs with Rand for some reason, which feels a bit strange, considering how rarely Rand has used his sword. But he has unconsciously drawn it, which I thought at the time was like a callback to his previous lives. So maybe Gareth Bryan senses Rand's previous lives. Not really, but it's a bit strange, is my point. Eleda finally asks where Rand got the sword, and Rand explains that he got it from his father, who thought that he should have a sword with him out in the wider world, which makes perfect sense. And Eleda is a word twister, making it sound doubly surprising that 2 shepherds from the 2 rivers would have a Heron Mark sword when it's the same sword. There's just one is not. She's wily. She then asks Rand when he arrived in the city, and he feels the need to lie to her, saying that he arrived just that day, and saying that he's staying at another inn. Eleda twists this information to saying that it's really convenient that he arrived just as Logain was arriving, just before the royal siblings are about to leave, and how he had fallen into the garden. Morghese is quite admirable in asking Eleda exactly what accusation she is making here, but Eleda does not answer precisely. "The Dark One stirs in Shire Ghoul," the Aes Sedai replied. "The shadow lies across the pattern, and the future is balanced on the point of a pin. This one is dangerous." This causes Elaine to fall to her hands and knees, begging for Rand to be spared. If she hadn't stopped Rand from leaving, then he wouldn't be in this mess. This does lend some credence to those rumors that Eleda is controlling Morghese, since Elaine seems so ready to believe that Morghese would harm Rand on Eleda's urging. Morghese again asks Eleda for clarification. She asks if this is a foretelling. And here we do get some exposition of Morghese telling Eleda things that she already knows, this time being that these foretellings come over her suddenly and irregularly. Morghese is also obviously accustomed to the fact that Aes Sedai, they don't lie, but they are very good at not telling the truth when they don't want to. And she orders Eleda to be clear and to keep no secrets on the matter. "This I foretell," Eleda replied, "and swear under the light that I can say no clearer. From this day Andor marches toward pain and division. The shadow has yet to darken to its blackest, and I cannot see if light will come after. Where the world has wept 1 tear, it will weep thousands. This I foretell." A pall of silence clung to the room, broken only by Morghese expelling her breath as if it were her last. Eleda continued to stare into Rand's eyes. She spoke again, barely moving her lips, so softly he could barely hear her less than an arm's length away. "This too I foretell. Pain and division come to the whole world, and this man stands at the heart of it. I obey the Queen," she whispered, "and speak it clearly." Rand felt as if his feet had become rooted to the marble floor. The cold and stiffness of the stone crept up his legs and sent shivers up his spine. No one else could have heard, but she was still looking at him, and he had heard. Rand again states that he is a shepherd from the 2 rivers, and Gareth Bryan suggests that they can keep him in the prison until the siblings are on their way. Eleda seems to be very sure that Morghese will do what she wants, even without her making a specific accusation against Rand. She flashed a hard smile at Rand, a smile that barely bent her lips, mocking his inability to say that she was not telling the truth. She suggests that if they can easily, lock Rand up and while they keep him in prison, maybe another foretelling will come, which is so sneaky. However, Margay surprises everyone by asking Rand to swear on his name that he didn't mean any harm. And he swears on his name, and she lets him off because he hasn't done anything wrong. And she's apparently a just monarch, which we like. Queen, one might even call it. "Thank you, my queen," he said hoarsely. He could feel Aleda's displeasure like a heat on his face. Though Margay is obviously not completely under the influence of Aes Sedai. Rand is dismissed, and Aleda is asked to stay with the queen to discuss the children of light who is flooding into the city. Elaine and Gavin escort Rand to the gates. Rand is a bit dazed from it all, and Elaine gets in a parting shot of telling him that she thinks he's handsome before she goes. Gavin stays to laugh about his sister, and Rand asks him what he looks like, if not someone from the Two Rivers. And like our other clues to this fact, Gavin confirms that he is the spitting image of an Aielman. He then also laments that the two of them didn't have time to get to know one another, which makes me hope that they will in another book. Rand is escorted out the gate, and as soon as it slams shut behind him, he runs back to the inn. And I am sorry about the perhaps too detailed blow by blow of this chapter, but it was so good that I couldn't help myself. None of these characters are further relevant in this book, but it gives me really high hopes for the coming ones, for when we see them again. Chapter 41. Old Friends and New Threats. Rand runs all the way back to the inn, where there has been a scuffle about someone trying to steal some cats, on account of all the rats in the city. Lam Wyn made short shrift of them, by all appearances. Rand obviously only cares about trying to find Master Gil to get advice on this latest turn of events. He finds him with Loyal in the library. Rand describes his day from the meeting with the beggar until leaving the palace, and eventually Gil does believe that he isn't joking. Loyal takes this as further evidence that Rand really is Tavaran, and I agree. Rand tells everything except what Aleda whispered to him, and Gil decides that it's much too dangerous for Rand to remain in the city. He assumes that Aleda will have men searching for him, and that it will take at most 2 days for them to search every inn in the city. Gil promises that he will arrange horses and whatever else they need, and Loyal renews his wish to join them, and now Rand agrees, because he's obviously scared what Aleda will do, and he wants more support than Matt can give. However, before they can make detailed plans, a maid arrives to say that there are white cloaks in the common room making trouble. Gil instructs Loyal to stay in the library. The Ogier snorted, a sound like cheeks ripping. "I have no desire for any more meetings with the Children of the Light." This is a nice enough description, and is one that Jordan likes to reuse, like comparing snorts or snores like the ripping of sheets. Yet like he likes to repeat people trying to look everywhere at once. Another one of his favorite lines that he repeats throughout is when a character is scared or very nervous, they have to like work up some spit to be able to talk. And that is equally gross to think about every time. And it doesn't really seem very believable to me that your mouth gets that dry. Like, I have taken medication that dries out your mouth. It does make you make a very annoying clicking sound when you talk, but it doesn't, you can still talk. But maybe that was just my experience. I shouldn't talk for everyone here. But I don't like reading it, and it seems superfluous. When they get to the common room, there are 5 white cloaks, and with every sign that there will be an escalation. Lam Wyn was lounging against the wall by the front door, intently cleaning his fingernails with a splinter. 4 more of the guards Master Gil had hired were spaced across the wall from him, all industriously paying no attention at all to the white cloaks. Again, dangerous people paying no mind. The ranking white cloak is very rude of course, stating that they are searching for dark friends. He only has time to say that one of them is a boy from the Two Rivers before Gil interrupts, saying that there are no dark friends in his establishment. Everyone in the Queen's Blessing is loyal to the Queen. And this provokes the White Cloaks to be derisive about the Queen's association with Aes Sedai, thus provoking every man in the room, who all rise together to great effect. The White Cloak then threatens to put the dragon's fang on the door, and Gil gives him a 3 count to get the hell out, which he takes. They obviously assume that the White Cloaks were after Rand and Mat, but we know, the reader knows, that they are probably hunting Perrin and Egwene. And just then, someone shows up at the kitchen asking for Rand and Mat by name. Hooray! The reunion is very moving, despite the obvious injuries on Perrin's face and his unwillingness to raise his gaze. This would be more moving if it were like an effect of like the trauma of captivity, rather than Perrin wanting to hide his yellow eyes. Gil is very welcoming and extremely respectful toward Moiraine, at the same time as not wanting her under his roof. But he's polite, and he can't really not offer her his best room free of charge, which she accepts but insists on paying. And Moiraine is immediately popular with the cats in the inn. And cats being able to determine someone's character is like a trope in fiction, along with, you better be nice to cats or pay the consequences. A calico cat sauntered in from the hallway to strop the innkeeper's ankles. Nice use of strop. And by the cat, Moiraine casually asks whether there is a problem with rats in the city, which is confirmed, and she offers to make the inn immune to the presence of rats, which makes Gil very happy. Finally, Nynaeve asks about Mat and is extremely worried when she finds out that he's not well. Rand takes them up to the room, and on the way, Perrin asks about Tom, and there's a damper on the mood when Rand tells them the truth. The silence thickened around them, stifling the little chuckles, flattening the joy, until they reached the head of the stairs. Mat is in a terrible condition. He is slightly feverish now, but he is primarily extremely cruel toward Perrin about the wolves, and to Egwene and Nynaeve about the One Power. Then Moiraine catches up to the group, and she bodily removes Nynaeve from Mat's side. And when she then approaches Mat, he attacks her with the knife, stopped by Lan. 1 minute Lan was in the doorway. The next he was at the bedside, as if he had not bothered with the intervening space. Nice use of intervening space. I do have an opinion on the use of the word minute here. In a culture where timepieces are rare, I do find it kind of strange for people to refer to short intervals of time in the measure of minutes or even more seconds. But I'm dubious about it, but I'm not super firm on this rule, because I don't actually know the historical precedent. When did people begin to talk about time in such short chunks? Did they do that before clocks were a regular occurrence? I mean, the word hour is slightly different to me, because I have a vague notion of, at one point in my life, no idea when, having learned that before an hour was defined to be 60 minutes, an hour was a portion of time, a portion of a day was an hour. And I think in ancient Greek, there were goddesses called the Hours who represented the seasons. So it was indicative of a repetition of time. Not many opinions in this commentary, but just thoughts. And also, more nitpicky and sort of in contrast to that whole part, in this use of the word minute, it implies to me that up to 60 seconds have passed between Lan seeing the danger and deciding to take action, which is obviously not what they mean. And I do know that this is an expression. He's not doing anything wrong here, and he's doing it, and he's done it before, but it just doesn't really work in my head. Anyway, Moraine asks where he got that knife. She brings up that she did ask them whether Mordeth gave them anything, and Matt can't answer for himself, so Rand explains that he took it from the floor, and that Rand himself didn't know about it until after. Moraine explains then that the dagger is so evil that it acts like a beacon for the Dark One and for the most wicked Dark Friends. I am quite skeptical when she says that a Fade would be able to sense it for miles, because sure, that might be true, but just in the beginning of this video, we talked about the chapter where a Fade is not like, it's like 20 yards from them. So could that Fade sense the knife? Or could it not sense the direction or proximity of the knife? Could he just sense that the knife was within 20 miles? I don't like this at all. Lan confirms that, like, people in Caemlyn seeing strange shapes in the dark is the fact that there are Trollocs around, and they are presumably preparing to attack Caemlyn to get the boys. This is so depressing to Perrin that he voices that it would be better if they were all dead. Moraine counters that if them being dead would only serve the Dark One, but dealing with the immediate issue, she orders everyone out of the room while she takes care of Matt. She explains that bringing anything out of Shadar Logoth is to free that thing from whatever it is that contains the evil within the city. And if he's left alone with it, if nothing is done about it, he will do whatever he can to spread that evil to anyone he can. Moraine then whips out the Angreal and orders everyone to go until she's finished. Chapter 42. Remembrance and Dreams. The party sans Moraine and Lan goes downstairs again. Rand does notice something different about Perrin's eyes, and he is uncomfortable by it. He wondered why and wanted to ask, but whenever Perrin walked through a deeper patch of shadow, his eyes seemed to gather what little light there was, glowing softly like polished amber, which is a very nice description. The nice descriptions dwindle, however. They head to the library, and all of the new people are introduced to Loial. Perrin jumps to asking about the steading, of course, because they were saved by a steading. Like, Ogier are apparently very talkative. So Loial talks away the time while Rand is being angsty about how Matt has already taken maybe irrevocable damage from this whole ordeal. Eventually, Moraine and Matt appears, and he has been healed temporarily. His memory is very patchy since Whitebridge, supposedly ever more so as the dagger was taking control. And Matt is sort of absolved of guilt for his behavior. He still needs to keep the dagger or die until more Aes Sedai than Moraine can separate him from it. Loial offers traditional greetings to Moraine, which apparently involves that the steading offers sanctuary to servants of the light, which makes Moraine answer by saying that he should be careful about who he says that to, because all of the Aes Sedai in the city, except for her, are Red Ajah. Then she politely asks Loial to leave, as they plan, and Rand reveals that Loial is coming with them. And Moraine accepts this because of fate, as she often does. And them stating the fact about their situation to each other leads to the revelation that the Children of the Light were after Perrin and Egwene. Rand reveals that he assumed that they were after him because Eleda pretty much named him Dark Friend, that makes Moraine ask what Eleda Sedai has to do with everything, which leads Rand onto explaining what happened with Elaine and Gavin and Morghese. And Egwene focuses entirely on who Elaine might be. And Loial then takes advantage of meeting an Aes Sedai to ask a very specific question. Apparently, 20 years prior, a man came to his steading, and he saying that he had a story that he intended to take to Tar Valon, saying that the Dark One intended to blind the eye of the world and kill time itself. Perrin then cuts in with the story that the Tinkers had about the Aiel girls, saying the same, who had the same message. Perrin then also says that Baalsamin also talked about the Eye of the World. And the three boys now agree that they have to tell Moraine about the dreams. Specifically about the Dark One saying that the Eye of the World would never serve them. Moraine says that she did ask them about dreams once, which does not make her come across as very smart. And nor is she kind, saying that she could have helped if they had told her, but now it's too late, which is such an asshole thing to do. Now she says that every time the Dark One touches them, makes it easier for him to touch them again. And she had so much opportunity to say this before. Like, for instance, instead of threatening to kill them. She has no leg to stand on in this discussion because she has given them no reason to trust her, and she takes no responsibility for that. And then she goes on to scare them even further, now that it's too late to do anything about, saying that just as like the Forsaken, and she has a list of them, Aginor, Lanfear, Balthamel, the Mandred, and Ishamael, like these Forsaken can bind people to them, so can the Dark One much more effectively, which I sort of doubt. Big doubts on that. If it isn't clear, I don't like Moraine. I think there is very little to back up her arrogance. Like, the boys trusting her is her fault entirely. Maybe she has a grand plan which is served by the boys not trusting her, but so far it has only made things worse. She now says that the boys will have to find strength somehow to resist the Dark One, and Perrin very strangely says that he might have found his way to do that, which is strange because in the last dream of his that we saw, Baalsamin killed the wolf that was present, like incinerated it with a touch. And now there aren't even any wolves around, so I don't really know what he means. Moraine also wants more details about what the Dark One said in the dreams, and Matt says that a major point is that the Amyrlin is going to use them. Like she used this list of other men. Davian, Rowlin Darksbane, Urian Stonebow, and Gwari Amalasan. And he stops himself from adding Loghain to the list. And Rand now realizes that this list of men is probably of former false dragons, since Loghain is on it. Moraine avoids the question about who they were, which tells us a lot as well. Loyal says that all three of the boys are Ta'veren, and Moraine says that she only expected one of them to be. Moraine decides that hearing about the Eye of the World from three sources means that they have to go there and warn the Green Man about what the Dark One is planning. And she also decides that Caemlyn being surrounded by Trollocs and Fades means that Loyal have to help them use the ways. Loyal doesn't want to because if we were to enter the ways, we will all die or be swallowed by shadow. Chapter 43, Decisions and Apparitions, in which we learn a little bit more about the history of the Ogier. At the breaking of the world, which happened when the male half of the forest was tainted, some Ogier managed to stay in their studying, while most of them was for some reason in exile. I'm not precisely sure why that is, but they were, which is when they built cities and planted groves. The Ogier of the studying offered sanctuary to any male Aes Sedai because the taint of the Force couldn't touch them there. Eventually, all of the male Aes Sedai couldn't stand staying in the studying because of they felt the loss of connection to the One Power, and they left. And apparently, the Red Aja believed that this prolonged the breaking of the world. And that is why the Red Aja would resent hearing Loyal's offer of sanctuary to servants of the light, because that reminds of the disservice they did the world. Moraine is of the Blue Aja, and they believe that if not for the sanctuary, then the breaking of the world would have been too catastrophic to at all recover from. And I'm skeptical of such a sharp delineation of beliefs between the different Ajas, unless this one belief is the defining thing of which Aja you belong to. Then I would assume that opinions vary within the Aja as well. Anyway, those male Aes Sedai, like in return for being given sanctuary, they taught the Ogre about the ways, which is extra-dimensional pathways with gates, which you can use to like travel fast across the world. The Aes Sedai also presented Ogier with the talisman needed to create new ways, which they regularly did. However, for some unknown reason, during the War of 100 Years, which is the war that followed the death of Arthur Hawkwing, the ways began to become tainted by shadow and haunted by a force called the Mashin Shin, the Black Wind, and which apparently drives whoever it touches to madness. Moraine insists that using the ways is their only option, both to leave the city unnoticed and to reach the Eye of the World in time. And they need to get to the Eye of the World because it apparently holds enough power to break the Dark One's prison, which would be very bad indeed. Loyal doesn't want to break the rules of the elders, and like Matt just doesn't want to go to the Blight on principle because the Eye of the World is in the Blight. Moraine argues that trying to avoid fate won't help them because they're Tavaran. And it's very interesting that she has fully adopted this argument when she hadn't before. It's quite convenient, I think. Rand takes the lead in volunteering to go, and Perrin and Matt follow, and along with Egwene and Nynaeve. Loyal still doesn't like it, but he sees the urgency and goes along with it, I guess. And then they like make their plans. Once dark fell, Lan joined them, adding his comments in that iron cord drawl. Nice use of iron cord drawl. All of the boys are like, they're worried about going to the Blight, which is where the Dark One's prison is, but Perrin's mood is really annoyingly portrayed. There was no worry on Perrin's face at all, but what was there was worse. A mask of weary resignation. Perrin looked as though he had fought something until he could fight it no longer and was waiting for it to finish him. Yet sometimes... ... It's good so far. But then... We do what we must, Rand, he said. The Blight. For an instant those yellow eyes lit with eagerness, flashing in the fixed tiredness of his face, as if they had a life of their own, apart from the big blacksmith's apprentice. There's good hunting along the Blight, he whispered. Then he shuddered, as if he had just heard what he had said, and once more his face was resigned. No subtlety! Subtlety is out the window, out of the building. No subtlety at all. Or am I to think that Perrin's personality has like totally shifted because of giving in to the wolves? Like, has he been reprogrammed by wolf power? Suddenly he thinks about hunting Trollocs rather than fearing them. Is that what I'm supposed to take from this? Anyway, Rand takes Egwene aside and begs her to, like, go home to the Two Rivers or to Tarvalin rather than coming with them. And Egwene has a mature moment. She's touched by his concern rather than annoyed that he might be attempting to control her. It's a hint strange that Egwene now uses Min's vision as a reason that she has to go with him, but okay, I guess. There's another like cutesy moment when Egwene renews her question about who Elaine is, and then when Rand just tells her the truth, she assumes that he's like joking and goes back to the others. Things have not changed that much. Hopefully, there will be a funny moment when Egwene meets Elaine in Tarvalin. Rand again thinks that Perrin would have known what to do because he's so much better with women, and it's wearing a little thin at this point. It was very cute the first times, but just Having that thought once from each of them would have been quite enough, I think. Gil comes to report that there is more unrest in the city, and now white cloaks are watching the building. But he promises that he will have them get them all they want and have them out of there unnoticed. They call it a night to get what rest they can until morning. Rand falls asleep worrying about Matt and the knife. From the first, he knew it was a dream, one of those dreams that was not entirely dream. But knowing that it's a dream doesn't help him wake up from it. The echoing splashes came on his heartbeat, as if his pulse counted time for them. Nice. In this dream, it appears that Balsamon knows less about the boys than it might have seemed before. And I find that slightly confusing. In the dream, there are 3 figures on the table. One with a wolf, one with a sword, and one with a dagger. It seems that Balsamon doesn't know which of them is which, and I don't really see the point of it. As the Dark One talks to him, Rand keeps up his mantra of denying him. You always do, in the beginning. This contest between us has taken place countless times before. Each time your face is different and your name, but each time it is you. If there was ever any doubt that Rand is the Dragon Reborn, surely it is gone now. The Dark One continues to monologue. You worm, you know nothing at all. As ignorant as a beetle under a rock and as easily crushed. This struggle has gone on since the moment of creation. Always men think it is a new war, but it's just the same war discovered anew. Only now change blows on the winds of time. Change. This time there will be no drifting back. Those proud Aes Sedai who think to stand you up against me, I will dress them in chains and send them running naked to do my bidding, or stuff their souls into the pit of doom to scream for eternity. All but those who already serve me. They will stand but a step beneath me. You can choose to stand with them, with the world groveling at your feet. I offer it one more time, one last time. You can stand above them, above every power and dominion but mine. There have been times when you made that choice, times when you lived long enough to know your power. You might think that this showcases an argument against my opinion that the Dark One is all stick all the time. But I would say that just claiming or saying that Rand will be rewarded if he does the right thing isn't really it doesn't mean anything when it's wrapped in immense hatred and threat of repercussions if he doesn't. And Balsamon obviously hates him, so I don't think that this is an example of a carrot all of a sudden. That's just my opinion though. Second, again, he says that this fight has been eternal. So was there a time before the Dark One or not? He's the father of lies, sure. But I would like a little bit of clarity. What Rand's mind sticks on is the implied existence of Aes Sedai serving him now, and Balsamon confirms the existence of the Black Aja since the Trolloc Wars. The dream ends with Rand having his hand injured and then he falls out of bed as he wakes up. Matt is still caught in his nightmare, so Rand shakes him awake. And Matt reveals that in his dream, he picked up the figure representing him, and now he's scared that the Dark One knows who he is. As I said, I'm undecided on the significance of this. Rand notices that there is a splinter in his palm, a splinter which vanishes as soon as he pulls it out. And Moraine shows up to wake them just as he washes his hands. Rand complains that they've only had an hour of sleep, and Moraine informs him that they have actually had 4, and the boys look at each other. Something in that exchange must have communicated itself to Moraine. Nice. She heals Rand's hand and off they go. Chapter 44. The Dark Along the Ways. The party prepares to leave the inn, and we get one last useless gender-flavored conflict between Gil and his cook. Rand and Matt get horses, and the only thought given to Cloud is that Red seems to be of a more manageable temper. In the stables, Matt expresses concern about Perrin, which he then denies when Rand doesn't confirm his worries. Matt was made suspicious of people by the knife, but now it seems like that might just have been aggravating a tendency that was already there. The plan is that there is a secret door in the stables, one that leads to a pathway between the houses, so they can leave the inn secretly, heading for the door to the ways, which Loyal can orient himself towards by feeling. Faint glimmers of dawn pearled the sky above the eastern rooftops. Nice use of pearled. The gate is in an unused cellar, and Moraine opens the lock to the cellar with an unlocking spell, I guess. I believe that this spell is called Knock in D&D. Or Warhammer, one of the two. Loyal is angry because there used to be a grove here, and now all the special trees are gone. The point of the groves were to keep, the Ogier in exile from being too homesick and missing the studying too much. And I'm a bit torn on the affection for these trees, only because they were planted. They are specifically put there. And I don't like the senseless destruction of nature more than anyone, but just plant some more? I'm guessing it's a point to show how different Ogier are from humans. That Ogier naturally care for trees, and that humans don't. It seems like it's making commentary on something, but I don't know what, because there aren't any more details. Anyways, the gate to the ways is a carving of greenery, and Moraine opens it by moving the Avendasora leaf in the carving. Then the wall splits open, revealing a dark, shimmering surface. Lan goes first, followed by Loyal and Rand. Inside is complete darkness. Their lanterns made a small pool of light around them, too small, as if something pressed back the light or ate it, which is a very nice description. We also see that time passes slower on the outside of the gate, which is interesting since it must sort of counter the shorter travel time, however much. It does effectively show that this is a completely other place than, the real world. Each lantern enlarged the pool of light, but not as much as it should have. It was as if the dark became denser the more light there was, thickening as it fought against being diminished. I really do like the description of the ways, as a world corrupted by shadow. It sort of prefaces what would happen to the real world if the Dark One wins. The very stone of, the ways that the paths are made of seems to be falling apart. Moraine then closes the door by putting back the Avendasora leaf in its original position, and off they go. The lanterns should have given enough light to fill a house, but 10 feet away from them it stopped. The blackness stopped it as if it had struck a wall. The creak of saddles and click of horseshoes on stones seemed to travel only to the edge of light. Again, very nice. The waste consists of bridges and platforms, which is very similar to Rand's dream about being pursued through a maze by Balsamon. It is understandable that Rand wouldn't recognize it because it's so dark. I both hope that we do and that we don't get a confirmation that yes, it was the ways. Rand wondered what held the bridge up. The horse's hooves made a gritty sound, as if bits of stone flaked off at every step, which is, again, so nice. I love it. Nothing but praise here. Loyal leads the way by reading guideposts between bridges. It's for an indeterminate amount of time in the darkness, and then they stop when they come to a collapsed bridge. Gasp. Chapter 45. What follows in shadow. The collapsed bridge is not as dramatic as it seemed. It is just another sign of the decay and has probably been going on for a very long time. The group just has to take a route around that particular bridge. So they keep going, and eventually they break for nightfall. Loyal laments that once upon a time there used to be lush vegetation in the ways, and Perrin... Nothing to hunt, Perrin growled. then looked surprised that he had spoken. I renew my complaint about subtlety and the complete absence of it. Rand has made observations about how Perrin seems to be different, and that would be enough. And I would have liked the ambiguity of whether it's the wolves or the captivity that did it. I would be more willing to accept Perrin having these thoughts if there were wolves around to put the thoughts in his head. We saw Elias's face go slack when he received information from the wolves. But there aren't any wolves here. Also, the narrative made a point of saying how Perrin thinks carefully about things and he likes to think things through. So it really doesn't mesh with his character of him just thinking aloud. I wouldn't hate it so much if it wasn't also unnecessary. It would have been so much more impactful if Jordan saved these reactions for later, for the next time Perrin encounters wolves. Anyway, Moraine doesn't set any wards against evil in the ways because there's so much corruption there that any spell she casts would be undone or undermined or something, which is sort of interesting to me because it sort of sounds like what has been done to the male half of the source. Not the force. I'm trying. Moraine also takes this time to claim that she doesn't believe that Tom died in Whitebridge. She says that if a Gleeman had died, then people would have talked about it because Gleemen are still a big deal, even in a town that well-traveled. She also says that Min thought, according to Min's vision, Tom was part of the whole thing. And like the thing with the wolves, Min's power could be something that is like re-emerging from a much more ancient time. Matt mentions that Min was mostly interested in Rand, which piques Egwene's interest, and Rand has to defend himself saying that he only spoke to Min once. And Perrin then brings up Aram, who provided a lot more than one conversation. Egwene is abashed and suddenly not so eager to talk anymore. And it's a very good scene, in my opinion. She does deserve to be called out, but she isn't shamed here. And it is also evened out by Matt mentioning the farmer's daughter that was thirsty for Rand. And I really don't think that Egwene did anything wrong with Aram, but it seems like she has learned that just because someone pays, if a girl pays attention to Rand, it isn't necessarily because he has encouraged it. Just like she was just around and Aram paid her attention, which seems like a growth moment for her, and I like it. Moraine casts a spell on the boys for them to sleep better, I guess, and then they get going as quickly as they can when they wake up. The next day, Lan announces that they are being followed, though the taint on the ways prevents him from determining whether it is a good or evil person or thing following them. The ways are so dangerous that he can't really leave the group to investigate. And that is not as worrying as when they discover traces of Trollocs being in the ways. And Trollocs using the ways would explain how they are able to travel across country as fast as they do throughout the book. They even find some Trollocs being caught in a trap, which Moraine believes were left behind by those who made the ways to begin with. They continue on with additional care until Rand feels a breeze, and he remembers that Loyal said that there is no wind in the ways anymore. So that is obvious the black wind Mashin Chin, which sets them galloping over the final bridges. They reach the correct portal that they're going for, but Moraine discovers that the Avendasora leaf is missing. So, Moraine uses the power to weld an opening in the carving, though it's clearly not as pure as her usual power. Then Lan's cool warhorse tackles it open, taking no damage, even though that is a 3D carving of foliage, but it doesn't hurt him, thankfully. The group hurries through as Moraine tries to hold off the wind. something leaped from the end of the staff, like liquid light rendered to a syrup of fire, a blazing spear of white and red and yellow, streaking into the black, exploding, coruscating like shattered diamonds. The wind shrieked in agony, it screamed in rage. It's a very cool magic description. It was cold, not the chill of the waygate, but welcome natural winter cold that slowly, steadily burrowed into flesh. Nice description of cold. Moraine finally appears last, and they hear the machinchen. Flesh so fine to tear, to gash the skin, skin to strip, to plait, so nice to plait the strips, so nice, so red the drops that fall, blood so red, so sweet. Sweet screams, pretty screams, singing screams, scream your song, sing your screams. Which is so wonderfully creepy, but I would have finished on the plaiting of the skin, because that is so disturbing to me. The machinchen is, however, unable to leave the ways, even when the door is open, and that's fine. Sure, why not? Moraine then does some more aloud thinking, which I still really hate for her, though not as much as I hated for Perrin. Chapter 46, Fal Dara. They have escaped the ways, and Matt asks where they are. Shinar, Lan told them. We're in the borderlands. In his hard voice was a note that said home, almost, which is very effectively communicating that Lan has mixed feelings about Shinar, which is not spelled Shinar, in my opinion. On the way to Fal Dara, they pass a lot of abandoned farms, and Rand makes another pitch for Nynaeve and Egwene not coming with them to the Blight. Nynaeve shoots it down, though she acknowledges that the boys are indeed growing up. And also Egwene confides in Rand that she only danced with a ram and asks him not to hold it against her. Again, as I said, this feels like growth for Egwene, and I do hope that she doesn't default to jealousy again. Rand says that, of course she doesn't hold it against her, and remembers Min's prediction that the two of them aren't for each other in the way they want. We get our first clue about what Shinar is like by Fal Dara's high walls, which are as high as Caemlyn's despite it being a smaller city. Where the walls of Caemlyn had a beauty about them, the builders of Fal Dara seemed not to have cared if anyone found their wall beautiful. The grey stone was grimly implacable, proclaiming that it existed for one purpose alone, to hold. Nice use of grimly implacable, but it also kind of goes without saying. Why would you build a wall for any other reason than for it to hold? And isn't it how strange that I can nitpick about lines that I actually like? Maybe that should tell me something. Maybe there's a lesson here for me. We get more clues about how they live the fight, by how it's a law in Shinar that you may never cover your head whilst in a city, and this is to protect against fates. And this does sort of work against how there are countries that believe that Trollocs are fictional. As they enter the town, they are hailed by soldiers who recognize them, and they call Lan Dai Shan, and asking him whether the golden crane will fly again. And Loyal is hailed for being an ogier. We also see that all the people from the abandoned farms are in Fal Dara. Packed cheek by jowl, these folk watch their party ride by with leaden eyes and faces blanked of emotion. Nice use of leaden eyes, and a very nice illustration of an emergency. So we see that something serious is happening in Shinar. They continue on to the fortress in the center of town, and everyone calls for Daishan and the golden crane. And as we see battle preparations, horseshoes and arrows being made. Loyal is addressed several times in another language, and it sort of seems to me that the foreign phrases are immediately followed by the same phrase in common. And if that's the case, I don't really see the point. Besides showing off that he's invented a language. And it doesn't rise to the point any level, it doesn't rise to any level of annoyance. It's just curious to me. We learn that the lord of the fortress has actually sent for Lan to come to raise the golden crane banner, a message which Lan has obviously not received. The halls were stark except for the wall hangings, and even they used the fewest figures made with the fewest lines necessary to convey meaning, though in bright colors. I don't know why, but I love this description. You know exactly what they mean. Lan asks their escort, Ingtar, if things are as bad as they seem, and Ingtar reveals that things are worse than usual. And not only has there been Trollocs attacks throughout the winter, which is unusual, there is a huge army poised against them, which the Shienarans will attempt to meet in Tarwin's Gap. It sounds like a bottleneck strategy on the humans' behalf. I do find it curious that the Trollocs seem to agree to this battleground time and time again. The only reason that the humans would want to go to a gap for a bottleneck strategy is for a strategic advantage, but it seems to me like the disadvantaged party should do whatever they can to try to change the battleground to something more advantageous to them. So I wonder why they keep battling at Tarwin's Gap. Ingtar's grin slipped, but came back immediately. Silently he showed them into Lord Agelmar's study, then claimed the press of his duties and left. Nice use of claimed the press of his duties. Jordan very successfully manages to create a complete-ish image of these people, that they're always ready for battle. They live the fight, like I said. They live constantly, under the shadow of the proximity to the Blight and the constant threat of Trolloc attacks. But there's also inclinations that they have a rich culture beside it, you know? It is very easy to boil, he could very easily have boiled down the Shienarans to a singular function, which is to fight Trollocs and, eventually hoping to defeat the Dark One. But that's not all there is to them, which I appreciate. Lord Agelmar, as the Lord here is called, has the wrong impression, thinking that Moraine and Lan has come to fight in Tarwin's Gap with them. Moraine disabuses him of this notion, saying that they have their own battle to fight. It's also startling clear that, like in Andor, here Aes Sedai are venerated almost. Even more so than in Andor, because there were so many people against the Aes Sedai presence close to the throne. In this discussion, Lan gets testy, insisting that he is a warder first, rather than, a citizen of Shinar. He repeats that the 7 towers are broken, that Melkir is gone. Saying he's a warder first, not Daishan, as everyone has called him since he arrived. Which is obviously a title of some kind. Agelmar then reveals that he expects that they will lose at Tarwin's Gap, because the army they face is so huge, and that nearby cities have sent very few soldiers to help them because of the winter, that they have been attacked by Trollocs throughout winter. They don't want to leave their home unguarded, which means that they are there are too few to fight. He insists that Lan is Daishan, that he is a diademed battle lord of Malkir, and that his presence if he goes to the Gap, then other people will hear that the Golden Crane flies again and will come to protect Fal Dara when the Trolloc army inevitably arrives. And here is a very bizarre scene when Lan gets so angry that he crushes his wine goblet in his hand, and and seems oblivious when servants come to take the bad goblet and wipe his hand down and then put another goblet in his hand. But I guess that's just how intense and angry he is, or something. It's comedic to me. It's not meant to be comedic. He finishes off this by insisting again that he is a warder. Moraine declines to join the battle, saying that they have their own battle at the Eye of the World. It is also explained that the Eye of the World is near impossible to find. A lot of people try it all the time. And Agelmar is also very skeptical of the group that will go to the Eye of the World. And he wants to send, competent men to help them. And Moraine declines, of course. And one reason that she gives for declining is that apparently the eye of the world can only be found by someone that the green man approves of. And if the green man senses that if anyone in their party is there's like looking for the eye for the wrong reasons, such as for personal glory, then he won't appear. He apparently shows himself to the ones in greatest need, and Moraine is confident that their need is the greatest need there ever was. So they will definitely find him. And this is despite the fact that she has met the Green Man before, which is supposedly preclusive to meeting him again. Well, the plans are made. No one is... Egelmar isn't happy, but the plans are made, and Egelmar is apparently a very good host throughout. He engages the ladies, and he manages to make Loyal appreciate the stoicness of the architecture here, as opposed to the decorative, very aesthetically pleasing Ogier buildings. And there is a beauty and simplicity of simply executing a task well, without embellishments. The dinner is interrupted by word that a madman has attempted to scale the wall after failing to get in through a gate. The madman is brought up, and he is dirty, he is filthy and unkempt, and it is indeed Padan Fain. I don't know how obvious it would be that Padan Fain was both the madman in Whitebridge and the beggar in Caemlyn, because I knew he was sketchy from watching the series. So I didn't bring it up because I knew I had the spoiler, okay? It still feels to me like it shouldn't be surprising to anyone that it was Padan Fain, but I can't make that determination. How was it for you if you have read this book? Did you know that it was Padan Fain? And when did you know, if so? Fain first begins to cry pitifully. Fat tears cut runnels in the dirt on his cheeks, but they were unable to reach the bottom layer. Ew. Fain first blames everything on him and his burning eyes, very resentful of being made into his hound. Moraine demands to speak with Fain in private, and that causes Fain to gain another persona, this one of a suave advisor. He claims then that Padan Fain was only an alter ego that he used to hide from Dark Friends. He claims that he has all the information Egelmar will need to defeat the Shadow once and for all. When Moraine approaches him, however, he professes a desire to walk in the light again, and to be free of the Dark One. She leaves to interrogate him in private, of course with Lan following. Chapter 47. More Tales of the Wheel. As they wait for Moraine to return, Egelmar entertains the ladies. Egwene takes the opportunity to ask why people call Lan Daishan, and we get a short description of Lan's early childhood. Once upon a time, there was a kingdom in the borderlands called Malkir, and it had 7 towers. Lan was the infant son of the king of Malkir, when it was overrun by Trollocs and absorbed into the Blight. This failure was born out of ambition and Dark Friends, which is a fantastic combination. Apparently, it seems like the kings of Malkir were democratically elected by the noble elite, I guess. And the wife of the first loser, when Lan's father was elected, was very bitter about it. So, when her husband died, she tried to take control with the help of another supposedly loyal lord who happened to be a Dark Friend. The schemer, named Brian, fled with her infant son when the scheme failed, and the two of them were presumably killed by Trollocs, which is the third instance of someone disappearing, presumed dead. The first one being Tigraine and her brother, Tigraine, the woman who was supposed to be queen instead of Margase. The conspiracy to overtake Malkir was defeated, but the strength of the kingdom had been so undermined that they had no chance against being overrun by Trollocs. So, because of this, the king and queen of Malkir named the infant Lan a diademed battle lord in his cradle, and also, the next king of Malkir. And I'm sure that being a diademed battle lord is some really awesome feat. So it's a bit anticlimactic that Lan achieved the title when he was an infant. And I don't really get it. If kings were like elected in some way, how could they just name Lan the next king? Shouldn't there like be an election? How is Lan the rightful king is my question. I'm getting mixed signals here. The infant Lan was sent south with an honor guard to protect him, while Malkir was overrun, the king and queen dying in the final stand. It is a pretty moving story, but it doesn't really say a lot about Lan since he was so young. I'm more interested for whenever we learn about what caused him to become a warder, for instance. When he obviously feels a great sense of duty toward his people, I guess. So what made him prioritize Moraine's quests instead? The oath sworn over his cradle is graven in his mind. There is nothing left to defend, but he can avenge. He denies his titles, yet in the borderlands he is called the Uncrowned. And if ever he raised the golden crane of Malkir, an army would come to follow. But he will not lead men to their death. In the Blight he courts death as a suitor courts a maiden, but he will not lead others to it. This capability to raise an army will certainly become relevant at some point, and I predict now, based on absolutely nothing, that Lan will die in the following battle. Let's see if I'm right. No spoilers. Don't tell me if you know. Eaglemar here doesn't try to hide his disrespect for the boys, apparently on the merit that he thinks that better men should be helping Moraine, which is completely unfair. And then Moraine and Lan comes back. Moraine declares that Fane is the darkest dark friend that has ever dark friended, and Egwene quotes the adage that Bornhald said, that no man has walked so long in the dark that he cannot be brought to the light. And I find it interesting. Either this is a very common saying, and if it is very common, then I wonder whether it's common because it's in the tenets of the Children of the Light, or if the Children of the Light have gathered their doctrine from beliefs commonly held by a lot of people. It sounds like a quote from a religious text, but since there is so little religion in this book, I wouldn't know what text it would be. The Children of the Light looks like their tenets look like the closest thing to an organized religion, but it doesn't really fit the bill either. And this chapter is now the second in a row when we hear a character's backstory not from that character when they're not in the room. And Moraine makes a point of saying that she couldn't get the full truth out of Padan Fain. We learn here that Padan Fain is the one who led the Trollocs to Eamon's Field, after having been summoned to see the Dark One himself. Balsamon did not bestow him with honor, but instead tortured him with the purpose of condensing his knowledge of who he sought. The Father of Lies knew roughly where to find what he sought, but not much better than we in Tar Valon. I find this line from Moraine completely unsatisfactory. Because how, though? And no one here questions how anyone in Tar Valon had the idea to look for a nondescript person in the Two Rivers. I can absolutely buy that the youngsters are too intimidated by Moraine to ask her out of nowhere why she was in the Two Rivers at all. And I mean, it would be very presumptuous of them to demand answers spontaneously. But now would be the optimal time to question it, but Rand doesn't even have a thought about it. And I find it weird. The lack of curiosity here is very strange. Anyway, what Balsamon did to Padan Fain enabled him to begin to search the Barrelin and Two Rivers area 3 years prior to events. And then after every trip to the area, he was sent back to Shaiol Ghul to, distill and further refine his ability to find what he was looking for. What he had sensed was concentrated and fed back. When he entered the Two Rivers the next year, he was able to choose his targets out more clearly. Indeed, more clearly than even the Dark One had expected. Fain knew for a certainty that the one he sought was one of 3 in Eamon's field. Yeah, but how though? Anyway, Fain was imbued with more powers, apparently, and he did even more reprehensible lights, Dark Friend. And he was then promised rewards for bringing the one. Which is all fine, except for that Lan previously said that the Winter Night attack failed because the Trollocs didn't know about their festival and people weren't going to be on their farms. But listen, surely Padan Fain knew all about Winter Night and what it was like. So that wasn't true, obviously. So either Lan was completely wrong about it, or that's a plot hole. But the thing is, if we reconsider Winter Night with everything we know now, the whole plan doesn't make any sense. All the boys seeing a fade before it happened means that the fade had the perfect opportunity to just snatch them before the attack. And that is the stated objective of the Dark One, like snatch, don't kill. And apparently he could have been doing that for 3 years. Even before having fully condensed Fain's knowledge, he could have been just snatching boys and sorting out who they were after. If he wanted to wait to the last moment, so Tar Valon wouldn't be alarmed or something, then he still had weeks before Winter Night, right? And don't tell me that Fain had to be present to execute the plan, because what did he really? Nothing. We know it about, at least. So if the Dark One's objective is to have the boys in his grasp, then he has been very dumb about it. And I'm not happy. And if you think about how he treated Padan Fain, it is consistent with his attitude in the dreams. So that kind of blows my headcanon out of the water, that the Balsamon is so nasty toward Rand and the others because he's overcome by hatred. So I don't really believe that anymore, because he is, as hateful to Padan Fain as well. Well, but fine. I'm not happy about this additional information at all, because it doesn't fill out, the holes of the explanation we had before. It just blows cracks into it, and that's not how it's supposed to go. Oh, that's not a satisfying thing to happen. At least not to me, and at least not in this story. Well, Fain continued to tell that he was not treated well when the Winter Night attack failed. And, well, the Fates and Trollocs were so cruel to him that after Shatter Logos, he tried to run away from them just as much as he tried to pursue the boys. And he found that he no longer had a choice but to search after the boys. So he was obviously the one who pursued them in the ways, having an uncomfortably collegial encounter with the Machine Shin as well. However, when Moraine asked him about the Eye of the World, Padan Fain refused to answer. And sadly, the party doesn't have enough time to spend on her prying an answer out of him. If this man knows something, Agelmar said, I can get it out of him. His face held no mercy for Darkfence. His voice promised no pity for Fain. Torture! Lovely. Very much like the White Cloaks, wouldn't you say? Moraine is convinced that they have no time to spare, In particular, like the Dark One's power is going so strong that he could personally force the Fates and Trollocs to go into Shadar Logos, which we remember they hated to do. Eaglemar gives another push to convince Moraine to replace the boys with actual competent warriors. When Moraine argues that they are the ones who will fight at the eye of the world, he is first horrified that she has employed men who can use the Force, but she reassures him, saying that no, they're just Ta'veren. And she also says that the blood of Manetheren runs strong and pure in almost all these men. So now Rand and Nynaeve both know that Moraine knows that Rand wasn't born in the Two Rivers. I do also think that it is slight bullshit that this talk about Manetheren blood serves to somewhat convince Eaglemar of their worthiness. I just don't like it. It's not appealing to me at all. But that is just my bias, thinking that this genetic memory inheritance is lame, to be frank. Chapter 48, The Blight. The next day, Ingtar has escorted the party close to the Blight, to Ingtar's disappointment, because this will make him and his squadron too late to actually fight in the gap. He scorned to look at Rand and the others. He had learned they would accompany Lan into the Blight. Nice use of scorned. And Ingtar fits perfectly into the bill of someone who would rather die honorably than live well. He raised a gauntlet hand to Lan, open palm toward the warder. And here we have a typo. Warder being spelled with a lowercase w. Though this is how it should be spelled, in my opinion. Warder, a job title, shouldn't be capitalized, because you don't capitalize accountant, for instance. Which is in the same manner that you shouldn't capitalize Trolloc or Ogier, because you don't capitalize human. Unless there is a rule I don't know about, this makes no sense to me. And it is annoying. And in this chapter, Lan also scares the youngsters not to touch anything because of a seemingly innocuous creature called a stick, which is capitalized, which is also annoying because you don't capitalize koala. Do you capitalize Bigfoot even if we're talking cryptids? Maybe you do, and I'm undermining my own argument here. I'll look it up after. As they head into the Blight, the climate heats up, unnaturally so, affecting everyone except Lan, who is always cool. The heat is accompanied by flora, which appears to be rotting even as it grows, which is described to great effect. The warder was not affected, of course, at least not that Rand could see, but to his surprise, neither was Perrin. Or rather, not in the way the rest of them were. The big youths glared at the obscene forest, through which they rode as he might have at an enemy, or the banner of an enemy. He caressed the axe at his belt, as if unaware of what he was doing, and muttered to himself, half growling in a way that made the hair on Rand's neck stir. Even in full sunlight, his eyes glowed, golden and fierce. Half subtle, I guess, but I still don't like it in the slightest. There is too much growling in this book, overall. I do really like that proximity to the Dark One's prison is thematically shown as decay and rot, rather than something, barren or cold. I think it's really good thematically, and it is extremely well described. The heat did not abate as the bloody sun fell toward the horizon. In the distance to the north, mountains rose, higher than the mountains of mist, black against the sky. Sometimes an icy wind from the sharp peaks gusted far enough to reach them. The torrid humidity leached away most of the mountain chill, but what remained was winter cold compared to the swelter it replaced, if just for a moment. The sweat on Rand's face seemed to flash into beads of ice. As the wind died, the beads melted again, running angry lines down his cheek, and the thick heat returned harder than before by comparison. For the instant the wind surrounded them, it swept away the fetter, Yet he would have done without that too, if he could have. The cold was the chill of the grave, and it carried the dusty must of an old tomb newly opened. I feel like we've heard about those mountains before, and otherwise it's a fantastic paragraph. I love it so much. The eye of the world was beyond the mountain when Moraine found it, because apparently it can be in different places. They assume that it will be in the same place for Moraine for some reason, and why not? It's as logical as if it wouldn't be. They decide to climb close to a bunch of broken towers and a bunch of lakes, which is obviously Malkir. Beyond them to the west lay a network of lakes, the water glittering darkly in the slanting sunlight, like beads of random size on a necklace of many strings. With a nice description, and I don't know whether it's cruel of Moraine to suggest that they camp here, knowing what it means to land. But Moraine sets wards around the camp for hiding it from sight, among other things. As they settle down for the night, Nynaeve reveals that she will come to Tar Valon with Egwene. To Egwene's delight, and she demands promises from Mat and Perrin that they will come as well. She also suggests that Rand should be her warder, which he accepts, though he remembers Min's caution again that they're not for each other the way they want. They all go to bed, they bunk down for the night, but Rand can't sleep, so he hears as Nynaeve finally makes her move on Lan. It is quite sweet. Lan declares her to be so special and precious that he's not worthy of her, seeing how he has nothing to offer her and will probably die soon, because being a warder is very dangerous business. As far as rejections go, it is pretty perfect and quite sad without being cruel, as well as, very final. Nothing will change this situation. Even if she becomes Aes Sedai, he will still remain a warder and it will be impossible. I can imagine many ways for this to turn really annoying, such as if he goes back on the finality of the rejection or starts doing ambiguous things for her, like giving her small reasons to hope, I guess. Or if he doesn't give her any reason, but she still misinterprets what he's saying or starts to reinterpret what he said in her mind. I have read quite a lot of bad romance in my days, and there are so many tropes that would undermine the quality of any work in which they feature. So we'll see how this one goes. And that's not me hating on romance or anything, just bad romance. And even bad romance, I can't really hate on it too credibly because I read it voluntarily. I mean, that's an outlet for me, so I am not the one to throw stones. Chapter 49. The Dark One Stirs. The next morning, as they pack up, Egwene notices that Nynaeve has fallen ice, and she is immediately on her side against Lan. And we do like a girl's girl on this channel. Notably, Egwene and Nynaeve help Moraine disassemble the wards, foreshadowing the Aes Sedai of it all. They get on their way, and Moraine answers some questions about her expectations to find the Eye of the World. She answers, when people ask, she answers that the Green Man places the Eye of the World where there is the greatest need, and she is very confident that their need is the greatest that there could ever be, which sounds so arrogant, even if it happens to be true. The Blight continues to grow worse as they travel. Everything appears to be dead or rotten. The trees themselves were tortured, crippled things, twisted branches clawing at the sky as if begging mercy from some power that refused to hear. Lovely. And the Blight doesn't just look worse, it is also hostile towards them. There's trees that reach for them, and Lan has to ride away to kill off creatures. wiping corrosive blood from his sword, and Moraine needs to heal him over and over. Silently, a massive body leaped out of the trees at them. The warrior spun Mandar, but even as the warhorse reared, ready to strike with steel-shod hoofs, Matt's arrow flashed, piercing the one eye in the head that seemed mostly mouth and teeth. Kicking and screaming, the thing fell, one bound short of them. Van stared as he hurried past. Stiff hair like long bristles covered it, and it had too many legs, joining a body as big as a bear at odd angles. Some of them, at least, those coming out of its back, had to be useless for walking, but the finger-long claws at their ends tore the earth in its death agony. Really nice description of an abomination, though sizing it like a bear doesn't really say a lot. There are a lot of bears in the world, you know? And there's some more fighting and some more cringy battle cries. Fireballs streaked from Moraine's hands, and where they struck, a writhing tree became a torch. A toothed shape shrieked and beat with human hands, rent its own flaming flesh with fierce claws until it died. Fantastic. It keeps amping up, Moraine complaining that her continuous use of the power is like signal flames for fates to follow. It abruptly ends when they hear like a whistling, which Lan ascribes to a pack of worms, capitalized. We never get to see these worms, but they are apparently so dangerous that they scare off anything else. So they race toward the mountain, where apparently there reside things that even scare off worms. They flee toward the mountain, and Lan prepares to sacrifice himself. The Blight flowed past, weeds and grasses splashing rotten under galloping hoofs. "We are not going to make it," Lan announced. He did not slow Manderp's gallop, but his sword was suddenly in his hand again. "Watch yourself in the high passes, Moraine, and you'll get through." "No, Lan," Nynaeve called. "Be quiet, girl. Lan, even you cannot stop a worm pack. I will not have it. I will need you for the eye." I find it interesting that Moraine takes the time to admonish Nynaeve before telling Lan what to do. It seems like there's something there. Rand is having like a crisis that they're going to die, and then abruptly they are safe. They have found the Eye of the World, which is a beautiful garden kept by the Green Man. It was where it was needed. The Green Man is like a treant or ent, maybe, I guess, having the appearance of a giant man made out of greenery. He also says a lot of things in greeting of the party. He calls Loyal little brother, inviting him to sing tree songs together. He calls Perrin wolf brother, asking whether the old times walk again, but Perrin just avoids looking at him. Then he says this interesting thing to Rand. "Strange clothes you wear, child of the dragon. Has the wheel turned so far? Do the people of the dragon return to the first covenant? But you wear a sword. That is neither now nor then." It is interesting because now we know that now we're pretty sure that Rand is Aiel by birth. So the Aiel are apparently called the people of the dragon. So according to this note that we took, I'm guessing that it is the Aiel who will storm Tyr to fulfill that prophecy. And I also believe that we haven't heard anything about the first covenant, only the second covenant, which was formed after the breaking of the world. Also, Aiel apparently don't use swords, which is a lot of interesting things here. Rand says that he doesn't know what any of that means, and the Green Man is confused, fingering a scar on his head, which is very convenient, or we would have a source of too much lore before Jordan is ready for it. But here I'm also kind of corrected in thinking that the Green Man chooses who can enter, for he is also surprised that Moraine could find it twice. He also understands that something monumental is about to happen because of it, and he leads them to the actual Eye. Chapter 50, Meetings at the Eye. The party follows the Green Man through a flourishing garden, which he keeps. Rand is in deep thought about both what the Green Man said about him and just about the existence of this sanctuary. In the beginning of the story, he was very sure that the Green Man and the Avendesora was a myth. They all take in the beauty of nature, and it feels very much like the calm before a storm. A very cute moment with Egwene, and like a silent promise to protect her no matter what, made me think that it would be very bold to have her killed, but this is not that kind of story. Rand asks the Green Man about Avendesora, and the Green Man says that it's not here, which apparently an Aiel should know, with the interesting description of its ungentle branches, which I will remember. But they arrive at a mountain or a cliff with a door in it. "I will not go in with you," the Green Man said. The butterflies around him swirled as if they shared some agitation. "I was set to guard it long, long ago, but it makes me uneasy to come too close. I feel myself being unmade. My end is linked with it somehow. I remember the making of it, some of the making, some." Nice use of butterfly movements and some interesting lore, which of course doesn't get any deeper explanation here. He does say that 100 Aes Sedai made it, men and women, knowing that they would die in the effort of making it pure, and they knew that there would be some future day of need. Matt asks the Green Man, before they part, Matt asks to see the Tree of Life, and the Green Man said that the Avendesora isn't here, and hasn't been for 2,000 years, so some of the stories are, as expected, untrue. The Green Man goes away, and they enter the arch, marked with the symbol for Aes Sedai, which leads to a corridor, which leads to a cave. The cavern is lit by luminescent crystals, though most of them have gone out. Its main feature is a pool of what appears to be water, the eye of the world. Rand is made very uncomfortable by it, and Moraine says, "It might be called the essence of saidin." The Aes Sedai's words echoed round the dome. The essence of the male half of the true source, the pure essence of the power wielded by men before the time of madness, the power to mend the seals on the Dark One's prison, or to break it open completely. And here, I thought that not only is Baalsaman a terrible manipulator, he's also stupid. He tipped off his nemesis about his obvious plan to break out of jail. Why would he do that? Is he stupid enough to think that he would have managed to convert the boys before they got there? I'm very disappointed. I am disappointment. After all this time, the eye is still here. After all this time, because female Aes Sedai cannot use saidin. Rand asks the very cogent question of why she would bring them there, and she avoids answering. She's saying only that this is where the Dark One will strike. They hurry out of the cave, where they are faced by two men, one extremely old and one wearing a mask. Lan demands to know who they are and how they got there, and the old one says that they followed Matt's dagger. The hand that pointed to Matt was old and shriveled to scarcely human, lacking a fingernail and with knuckles gnarled like knots in a piece of rope. Nice use of scarcely human. Moraine asks who they are, and we get this wonderful description. Hands pushed back hoods, and Vance goggled. The old man was older than old. He made Sen Bui look like a child in the bloom of health. The skin of his face was like creased parchment drawn tight over a skull, then pulled tighter still. Wispy tufts of brittle hair stood out at odd places on his scabrous scalp. His ears were withered bits like scraps of ancient leather, his eyes sunken, peering out of his head as if from the end of tunnels. Yet the other was worse. A tight black leather carapace covered that one's head and face completely, but the front of it was worked into a perfect face, a young man's face, laughing wildly, laughing insanely, frozen forever. What is he hiding if the other shows what he shows? Then even thought froze in his head, shattered to dust and blew away. These two are the Forsaken Agenor and Balthamel, who have been mentioned earlier. Agenor, the old one, says that Balthamel no longer speaks because he no longer speaks with his tongue. The wheel grinds exceedingly fine over 3,000 years imprisoned. the very nice use of the chosen metaphor for eternity. They are obviously there for the eye of the world, and Matt tries to argue that the Forsaken are bound in Jael Ghul. But the seals on the prison is breaking, letting them and apparently Ishamael free again. Agenor is confident that the Dark One will be free, giving them new bodies when he is. And this time he will succeed because he is unopposed by the dragon. The only way that I can imagine the Dark One not being completely incompetent is if it would be impossible for the Forsaken to find this place without following someone in. Like, they needed to follow someone, and therefore they let that Aiel girl survive, even though she was very close to death. And how could he imagine? How could he know that the Tinkers would find them? Never mind. And the Dark One does claim to have given the information to that man that went to the Olgier studying 20 years ago. But in that case, this specific plan has been in the works for like 20 years. And that would mean that it isn't enough that just anyone finds the Eye of the World, because Moraine has found it. I'm assuming 20 years would be enough time frame for her. So it's not enough that anyone finds the Eye. So did the Dark One specifically need, or did the Forsaken specifically need the boys to go there? If that's true, that would kind of explain why he talked about the Eye to them. Even so, I would reiterate my point about bad plans. It's even worse if like the Forsaken said that they followed the dagger. So did they need the dagger to be able to follow them? I cannot imagine that the Dark One could have organized format to pick up the dagger. There are too many coincidences, really. Man, but even if like he confusion. Like, did he think that if he told the boys about the Eye of the World, that they would seek it out themselves? Or did he think that they would talk to an Aes Sedai who could help them find the Eye of the World? But if he meant to push them toward an Aes Sedai, why did he say all the things he said about them? Like, he was really aggressive in telling the boys that the Aes Sedai were dangerous. More dangerous than he was. If he wanted to drive them toward the Aes Sedai, he would have to assume that they would find one that wouldn't immediately want to gentle them. And I have no idea how many of those there are in the world. I don't think they're very common. Because I think in Rand's very first special dream, he was like urged toward a white tower, which I think is a tower in Tarvalon. But if he wanted Rand to seek out the Aes Sedai, why did you put a fade at the top of that tower in the dream? If there was such a complicated plan from the Dark One, it would be kind of impressive that he managed to actualize it, but also not really. It would have to have some really, really sound justification for how many variables there are. That would mean if he wanted the boys to find the Eye of the World themselves, that would mean that all of the Trolloc attacks and the Fades following them and the Dark Friends were all fake outs, hoping to herd them in the right direction, which there has been no sign of in the story, besides of the indirect inconsistency of whether they should be alive or not. Like, I can't make full sense of it with the information I have now. And it feels like I'm missing something. It feels like I'm missing something really important. And I can't tell whether that is just me missing something or whether it's not there at all. Am I being stupid? Okay. Back to the story. Let's calm down a bit. Agenor bemoans how long he has gone without, which implies to me that when the Dark One tainted saidin, he also made it unavailable for the Forsaken, which is interesting. That's a bold move, if that's the case. But if that's the case, which power are they using now? Or whose power are they using now? And then comes a quite heavy-handed display about the danger of Lance's split loyalties when he can't decide whether he should protect Moraine or Nynaeve, failing to protect either of them as Agenor force flicks him away. Nynaeve attacks in response, and Balthamel stops her. And Agenor is made even more evil by implying sexual intent from his companion toward Nynaeve. Gross. Rand sees that Egwene is about to try to help, so he stops her because he sees that it's futile. Mat and Perrin rushes Balthamel to help Nynaeve, which is virtue points for them, but Agenor brushes them away. This is when the Green Man reappears, trying to order the Forsaken to leave, which they of course refuse. He then sacrifices himself by killing Balthamel via hugging, and after he dies, like an oak grows in the spot to mark the place. It's very dramatic, changing very little as Agenor is still around. Moraine is poised to fight him, ordering all of the rest to flee, but Rand sees that Egwene is about to try to help Moraine, so he stops her and sets her running instead. Agenor, though, is unbothered by Moraine somehow, for some reason, beating her down before he tries to follow Egwene, and so Rand gets his attention instead and to lure him away. It's very, very dramatic. Chapter 51, Against the Shadow. So Rand flees, but he comes to a cliff with a sheer drop, so he has nowhere to run, and Agenor catches him. And Agenor also appears to be slightly less ancient now. Agenor also talks to himself, reasoning that he doesn't care about the extra reward offered on bringing Rand in alive to the Dark One. He doesn't want to share his power with anyone, especially since he considers himself a match for the dragon. Rand then becomes aware of a glowing magical rope, which is attached to Agenor and leading off into the distance. And it is pulsing power into Agenor. The cord commands all of Rand's attention, and then it seeks him out, imbuing him with power as well, which obviously pisses off Agenor. It filled his being. Light filled his mind, till only a corner was left for what was himself. He wrapped the void around that nook, sheltered in emptiness. Nice. Then, Rand, for some reason, teleports elsewhere. I guess, because I think he wants to get away from Agenor and the light. That is probably the teleporting skill, which Moraine said that there's no Aes Sedai alive who has the power to do. And right now he's in a mountain pass, toward the end of a battle between men and Trollocs as they retreat to their corners. And in this state, Rand is able to recognize 3 of the banners of the Trollocs fighting. It's not the end of the fight, it's only a brief pause, and he sees that the humans are hugely outnumbered by Trollocs, Fades, and Draghkar. Rand instinctually summons lightning and fire and earth to send at the Trollocs, and it's not a pleasant experience for him, and he's not at all in control of it. But he wipes out 8/10 of them, giving the humans a fighting chance. And Rand here is obviously not himself, and I don't really follow what happens to him internally. It seems like some other entity has control over Rand's mind, thinking, "It is not here. I will take no part. Only the chosen can do what must be done, if he will." And I wonder if this is some previous dragon thinking in his head. Is it the creator? I'm confused. The presence guides Rand somehow to the nightmare world as it continues to pump power into him. He climbs into the sky, and then suddenly he is at the door to the chamber with the mirror and the fireplace. Balsamon is there, and he says that he expected Agenor's greed, that he would try to kill him rather than share his power, and that somehow produced this eventuality. I don't see exactly how A led to B led to C, but sure. It does mean that Balsamor for sure knows who he was looking for now. We also see that Balsamon has a black cord, which is feeding him power. And I'm really embarrassed. It took me way too long to understand why Balsamon has a black cord. Because I was thinking, like, they're both men, so shouldn't they, like, be connected to the same thing? Like, they're both the male half of the source, so why is Rand's cord light and the dark one's dark? Is it thematic to make it, you know, good versus evil? But why then did Agenor also have a light cord? That doesn't make any sense. And I was, like, seething with annoyance before I face-palmed and realized that obviously both Rand and Agenor were connected to the Eye of the World, not the tainted source. Duh. Anyway, so Balsamon lived up to his name in at least one way when he lied, saying that the Eye of the World would not serve Rand. Rand is tired of running away, so he, emboldened by his power, he decides to face down the Dark One, even though it's obvious that the Dark One is overwhelmingly more powerful. They bandy insults for a while, Balsamon monologues, more notes to make. Other armies can be raised full. Armies you have not dreamed of will yet come. And you tracked me? You slug under a rock, track me? I began the setting of your path the day you were born, a path to lead to your grave or here. I yield allowed to flee, and one to live, to speak the words that would echo down the years. Jane Farstrider, a hero. He twisted the word to a sneer, whom I painted like a fool and sent to the Ogier thinking he was free of me. The black Aja, wriggling like worms on their bellies across the world to search you out. I pull the strings, and the Amerlin seat dance it and thinks she controls events. It is good that this is possible, I guess, but I still have no faith in Balsamon as a manipulator. He again says that he would rather have Rand alive than dead, but he doesn't say why, and until we learn why, I will be skeptical of how much easier this has made the journey so far. On a side note, if the man that went to the Ogier was Jane Farstrider, the fabled hero, that means that it's only been 20 years since he died, that he has become famous and have had stories widely distributed about him. And based on nothing at all, really, that sounds like a very short turnaround, especially since we don't know if there's printing technology in this world. And then Balsamon reveals the leverage which he should have been positioning throughout this book. Mother, he breathed, and she smiled, a hopeless smile, his mother's smile. I really like this because it's a throwback to the very early line that the only thing Rand remembers of his mother is her smile. Rand tries to deny that Balsamon has power over his mother, who is safe in the light, making me further confused about the afterlife in this world. We have heard very little about it, besides how the Dark One has power over the dead. So I don't see why this is such a shock to Rand. If I thought that Tom's reveal had a short build-up, then this is in another class altogether. Carrie Althor explains that the greater reach of the Dark One, like the increase of his power, means that he can now lure unwary souls away from the light. His mother's lips trembled, tears trickled down her cheeks. Each one burned him like acid. Nice. Apparently, the Dark One has grown so powerful that he can manipulate past souls to his side. This is not explained, but it ends in her begging for help, followed by her extreme torture by Fades, enraging Rand. His sword was in his hand, not the heron mark blade, but a blade of light, a blade of the light. Again, this is a fantastic use of capitalization, showing us what a powerful tool it can be. The sword easily kills the Myrddraal. Even as he raised it, a fiery white bolt shot from the point, as if the blade itself had reached out. It touched the nearest Fade. A blinding incandescence filled the chamber, shining through the half-men like a candle through paper, burning through them, blinding his eyes to the scene. This apparently, for some reason, sets Rand's mother free. And only Balthamen remains. And Balthamen is very surprised that Rand has the ability to wield that much power without dying. He claims that Rand would have to be taught to do that by the Dark One. Rand responds by severing the black cord, setting Balthamen aflame. The cut ends rebounded apart as if they had been under tension. The end, stretching into the nothingness outside, began to shrivel as it sprang away. The other whipped back into Balthamen, hurling him against the fireplace. There was silent laughter in the soundless shrieks of the tortured faces. The walls shivered and cracked, the floor heaved, and chunks of stone crashed to the floor from the ceiling. I'm including this for two reasons. One is that it's really quite similar to a scene that I wrote many years ago. Again, reminding that it's quite easy for two works to be quite similar without any plagiarism going on. I also like the fireplace more now because it seems to be Balthamen's prison of tortured souls. The room goes up in flames and Rand is forcefully ejected from it. Chapter 52. There is neither beginning nor end. Rand wakes up at the cliff, at first with no memory of anything. He sort of has to reassemble as a person. And seeing the burned remains of Agenor gives him a push. I don't remember Agenor dying, but obviously he did. Rand remembers that the Dark One is dead and goes searching for Egwene, exuberantly and clumsily. It is very cute that she is the first thing on his mind. He finds her with Moiraine and Nynaeve. Moiraine is badly injured, though she denies it. Here now we get the lore that Agenor was in the top 3 when it comes to power in the Age of Legend, behind the Kinslayer and Ishamael. She confirms that the seals of the Dark One's prison must have weakened enough to release an unknown number of Forsaken into the world. She also does not accept Rand's claim that Balthamen is dead, still refusing to call him by his true name. Rand, who is still confused, readily admits that he killed the Dark One using the One Power, which scares both Nynaeve and Egwene, but it's not enough to make Egwene scared of him, as she demonstratively hugs him anyway. Nynaeve, however, calls him too dangerous, which is a lot of points in the negative for her. I'm not entirely sure when I started thinking about points, but it's a pretty obvious loss here. Rand describes everything that happened, like the light had taken control of him. And then Moiraine reveals some of her suspicions about him. Not about him being the dragon, but about him being able to channel power. Apparently, the token that she gave him in the Two Rivers should have made him extremely suggestible. Despite that, he still chose to wait to talk to Tam rather than leave a note like she instructed. I guess that his suggestibility was quite brief, because after a couple of weeks, Matt suggested that they leave Moiraine behind and go somewhere else. Also, when they were leaving the Two Rivers, Moiraine didn't have to refresh Bella along with the other horses because she had already been refreshed by Rand's desperate desire for her to keep up. Moiraine also claims that she can give Rand no help whatsoever in controlling Sayadin. Can a cat teach a dog to climb trees, Rand? Can a fish teach a bird to swim? I know Saidar, but I can teach you nothing of Sayadin. Those who could are 3,000 years dead. Perhaps you are stubborn enough, though. Perhaps your will is strong enough. And I think this is so stupid, but it's one of those premises I just have to accept, because Aes Sedai don't lie. I think it's really silly to claim that the two of them are so different that there is absolutely no overlap in how they can be approached. There is absolutely no method of control that might work on Sayadin as well. I really hate it. It seems to me like a plot device to make it impossible that Rand could benefit from Aes Sedai guidance, because it doesn't fit with Jordan's plan, whatever that turns out to be. Anyway, the others have gone to check on the Eye of the World, which has apparently been used up, but the pool had been concealing stairs down. And Moraine says that she has told no one except Lan what happened, which Rand questions because he rightly expects that Moraine, as an Aes Sedai, will want to gentle him. Rand confronts her with a list of names Balsamon gave him, now knowing that they were all false dragons, and promising that he won't let the Amyrlin seat use him. Moraine then berates him for believing anything from the Father of Lights, which would be fair enough coming from anyone else. But she does promise not to tell the other ones about his abilities when they return from the cave. What they found, which had been hidden under the Eye of the World, is a large gold and silver chest, a bundle of fabric, and broken pottery. Perrin's irises have turned completely yellow, and I had not realized that this was an ongoing process. But apparently it's finished now. Rand is comforted by the fact that Lan doesn't address him differently despite knowing. And Rand also lies to all of the others about what happened, that he had lost consciousness and only just came to. They have no reason not to trust him, so they go on to check what they have found. The broken pottery is apparently the ancient sign for Aes Sedai, more akin than ever to the Jin-Jang symbolism presented, which is the flame of Tar-Valon combined with the dragon's fang. It was apparently made from an unbreakable stone called Kuendilar, or Heartstone. This is yet another thing that Aes Sedai have lost the ability to make, and it's special because it only gets stronger the more you try to break it. Not the one power itself wielded by the greatest Aes Sedai who ever lived, aided by the most powerful Sa-Angreal ever made. I do like this casual mention that there is a more powerful version of the Angreal. This piece of Heartstone was apparently one of the seals on the Dark One's prison, which I guess is how the Forsaken managed to escape. But then I'm not really sure why it was on the bottom of the Eye of the World. Was it not broken when it was down there? But why would the seal? It's just maybe the seals work. The seals in the prison is not at the prison. They can be anywhere, perhaps, and that's why they put it beneath the Eye of the World, where it would be protected. But it obviously didn't work because it's broken, I think. The chest has no obvious way of opening, but Moraine manages to pop it up. Inside is the Horn of Valere, and we will remember this note of the statement made by Tom in Berlin, which is really nice. Very well played, Jordan. And we learn now that the purpose of the horn is apparently to bring back dead heroes to fight in the final battle against the Dark One. I begin to wonder, Moraine said. The Eye of the World was made against the greatest need the world would ever face. But was it made for the use to which we put it, or to guard these things? Quickly, the last, show it to me. Very interesting. The last thing is the dragon's battle banner, featuring a dragon, and we remember that these people have no reference for the mythical creature dragon. The fabric of the banner is made of some strange material, which accounts for that it's not rotted away after all this time. But everything has calmed down. They decide to head back to Shinar, and when Rand asks whether it's all over, she is extremely cruel. We have done what we came here to do. From here you may live your life as the pattern weaves. Eat then sleep, Randolph Thor. Sleep and dream of home. She knows that nothing is over, and she still gives him false hope that it might be. She can screw all the way off in my book. How am I supposed to like this character in the slightest? Chapter 53. The Wheel Turns. It's the final chapter! Finally! And the group make to depart, but they linger at the oak which now grows where the green man died. Loyal sings a tree song which imbues the oak with, resilience, so that it might be able to stand against the blight which is already encroaching on this previous sanctuary. And it's very sweet. I know, I like it. It's cute. They crested a hill, and in an eye blink the blight was all around them, twisted and rotted in virulent rainbow hues. It's a very nice contrast in virulent rainbow hues. They return to the blight, which has lost some of its hostility. Nothing is attacking them. And Rand has an almost vision when they pass by Malkir, like a vision of the towers not broken. Interesting. And when Perrin wonders why the blight is so much milder, Moraine says that they managed to strike a blow against the Dark One, and then refuses to explain further. When they get out of the blight, they see that spring has finally sprung in the rest of the world. With a vengeance, they meet some people who are celebrating a great victory in Tarwin's Gap. So Tarwin's Gap has to be pretty close. Then they receive the same news when they reach Fal Dara, that a miracle has happened that saved Shinar and brought spring at the same time. The group goes to see Egilmar, who describes what happened, like that he saw a man in the gap wielding the power, but he didn't recognize it as Rand at the time. He also reports that Padden Fane is still in custody. Moraine, on her part, recaps the death of the Green Man, the disappearance of the Eye of the World, and to Rand's surprise declares that they won the battle, but the war against the Dark One is far from over.
The saga of Dune is far from over.
She reveals the horn to Egilmar, who is impressed and believes that they should blow the horn and fight the final battle. But Moraine forbids it, saying that the horn must be taken to Ilion. She says that for some reason, there is where the forces against the dark must rally. I'm guessing that there is a prophecy connected with the dragon that needs to be done, and that's why Ilion is also regularly searching for the horn. She does not reveal the banner or the broken seal, however. Days pass of celebrations, which Rand does not partake in. Lan is instructing him in swordsmanship. On this day, when Lan says they're finished, Egwene shows up. Rand tells her that he has to go far away where he can't hurt anyone. Egwene suggests that he should go to Moraine for advice, and apparently Moraine refuses to speak with Rand whatsoever. She is such a charm. He obviously can't go to Tar Valon because if other Aes Sedai find out about this, they will want to gentle him. Rand's solution to the dilemma is to never use the power again, and we can all guess how that is going to go for him. Rand's final thought as he embraces Egwene is regret, that she will become one of those that he can never trust, which is, at this point, it is fair enough. The final paragraph is the first of Moraine's point of view. Her insufferable behavior is somewhat explained by her being a noble woman before she became Aes Sedai. Apparently, she can also use her signature blue hairstone, which I have failed to mention, to listen in on people, which she is currently doing on Rand and Egwene. The final line is this: "The prophecies will be fulfilled," the Aes Sedai whispered. "The dragon is reborn." And I hate this last bit, because she's sitting there like she's some mastermind or something, that she is somehow accounted for all of this happening, that everything has somehow turned out according to plan. I really dislike this character, and it's primarily because of how she's written. I think Jordan fumbled her, along with the Dark One. But that is the end of book 1. And that's, as I said, the end. I would be very surprised if the Dark One is dead. But I guess that the Forsaken could fill the role of antagonist, and it would be difficult for them to be worse than the Dark One, seeing how incompetent he comes across to me. I really dislike this feeling of feeling like I'm missing something, not knowing whether I'm being stupid and I'm just not seeing it when it's obvious, because it feels like it should be obvious about what the Dark One's plan was in this book and how it unfolded. And it might very well be that I'm being stupid. I told you about my misconception about, the color of the power chords. But if I'm not seeing it because it's just not there, or if it is as contradictory as it seems in my head, I am very disappointed. The thing is that it feels to me like this should be rounded off in this book. Because a lot of the time, you can sense if you get a piece of information which will lead to something else, or you get a piece of information which you should remember for later in the story. You can sense that in the writing. And I don't sense that there will be more information here. And that is obviously a guess, because I don't know. But that's where the contradictory feeling comes from, I think. That's why it feels like unsatisfactory rather than just unanswered. However, I have read the prologue to the second book, so I do know that he didn't die. He was just very badly burned. Like a disfigured Albanian boy coming across a racist dragon.
I'll be the racist dragon.
So, what do I feel about this book? I really like it. You might think that all of the criticism I have means that I don't like it, but that's not the case. If I don't like something, I will most often don't have strong opinions about it. The crucial parts of a high fantasy novel is executed very well. The world building is thorough, consistent, and well paced. Most of the characters are well shown and consistent in their behavior, with exceptions, of course. I do have a lot of questions, some of which I'm sure won't be explained to the very end. Primary among my long-term questions is the emphasis on the ages repeating themselves. The Age of Legend being the earliest sort of remembered age implies to me that the next one might be like that one, with male and female Aes Sedai working together. But that would require the male half of the source being untainted somehow. Or the next era will be like the era before the source was even used, with with wolf people running around. And maybe like Sayidine will cleanse itself with time, and then there will be an Age of Legend. The repetition thing sort of clashes with what you expect of a classical fantasy, that being that it ends with the Dark One's death. If we assume that the Dark One has existed from the beginning of time, it wouldn't be a repetition of an earlier age if he were to die. I keep drawing comparisons to the Lord of the Rings, and even though I haven't read the Silmarillion, every time I can never say the Silmarillion, I have grasped that the battle between good and evil is eternal, that Sauron is just the latest incarnation of evil, and that there will be another one after he's gone. But the lore in the Wheel of Time has been very contradictory and patchy so far. Balsamon is the father of lies, that we have to assume that everything he says could be a lie. So I don't know. It makes it very unclear at this point. Or maybe the final battle does represent like the end of the world, for it to be like sort of remade by the creator with a new Dark One. But that would be a difficult sell to me. Or I am taking the concept of repeating ages way too literally. I'll just have to see. But all in all, I'm very curious to continue. I will say that writing this script has taken a ridiculous amount of time. And I don't really know why. But the script itself is twice as long as my script for Dune, which is why I broke it up in 3 videos. And I didn't keep track of the hours when I wrote it, but maybe I will for the next book just to see. The thing I love about fantasy novels is the thing that makes the script drag, I think. And that is the fact that you never know when there's world building, you never know if a detail presented is only for flavor, to make a rich world, or if it will become relevant at some point. So you have to make a note of everything, more or less. And thus we have all of these notes, plus all the ones that I didn't mention because they didn't become relevant in this book. But there is one thing left to discuss, which is the glossary. And here I will make a trigger warning for like discussions of sexual assault. So I will give you time to skip to this timestamp if you don't want to hear it. At the end of the book, there's a glossary. And I mentioned in the first video some things of what I don't like about it. But also, under the entry for Trollocs, we get this. Able to interbreed with humankind, but the offspring are usually stillborn, and those which are not often fail to survive. And if we are going to stick with the Lord of the Rings likenesses, I have always assumed, but never investigated or confirmed, so this is speculation as well. When I read Lord of the Rings, I had the feeling that Tolkien kept orcs asexual for a reason. I think so. Like, whether that's true or not, I'm not sure. I haven't checked, like I said. Because this confirmation that Trollocs can sexually reproduce with humans makes the world so much more incredibly dark. I think we all know that armies are liable to do horrific things in territories they conquer. And not all armies at all times, obviously, but enough of them. And those armies are presumably made of largely average people. So what do you think would happen if you had a canonically evil army led by canonically even more evil creatures led by the canonical personification of evil? At this point, with this information, I would have to need a reason why there isn't rampant sexual assault wherever there is a Trolloc attack. And I'm not saying that it's bad to have gritty realism to your fantasy world, but this world is now sort of entirely tarnished for me. Like, every time there's mention of a Trolloc raid, I will assume sexual assault in the aftermath, regardless if it's mentioned, which I assume that it won't be. So I can only hope that Jordan has a whopper of a reason for making this canonical. I hope that whichever half Trolloc character they encounter at whichever point is so indispensable to the story, and that his half orc origin is indispensable to his character. Indispensable enough to make Trolloc sexual assault a fact. And the idea that the reproduction might be consensual is disturbing in a whole other way. I can't tell you how disappointed I am that he put this in. Because if he hadn't put it in, then I could have kept my blinders on, like maintain my credible denial of this aspect of war. But we'll see. Maybe I'll eat my words when we get to that part. And I know that I am projecting my real world knowledge onto this fantasy world. And also I'm doing it prematurely because it isn't part of the story yet. And I say he invites it by putting it in the glossary. He said he thought that it was important enough for us as readers to know that Trollocs can procreate with humans. Why? I don't look forward to seeing whatever comes of this. I think that I will either be angry because I'm revolted by what happens, or I'll be angry that this whole experience, this whole line of thought was superfluous because it doesn't bear out in the story. So there's no good option here, I think. Well, I guess, as I said, I might eat my words on it. I might change my tune and say that, wow, that was actually really brilliant of him to add this facet to Trollocs. I don't think that's likely. But I won't say that it's impossible. He might handle it very well. And that's the last I'll say about it until it becomes relevant. And that is a sad note to finish on, but it's not my fault. It's just another reason for me to hate appendices, which I do. More with everyone I see, I guess. I will get started on the next book, The Great Hunt, soon. I sincerely hope that it won't take me as long to finish. I don't think that I will read it 4 times. I didn't intend to read this one 4 times, and while it is good, I will say it's good. For most part, it maintains a very high quality. It does not stand up to 4 readings. I was struggling to pay attention during the final go-about. And see what I have done to this poor book. Like, look at this. This is despicable. I'm usually good at keeping paperbacks looking nice, but this look is what I did. I will have to buy some protective plastic or something for the books I read for this channel if this is what's going to happen. Though it is slightly frustrating because I know, like we all know, that it is possible to create paperbacks that this does not happen to. I own several. We have the technology to create paperbacks that do not do this. But it's not the standard, I know. I do have like a vague hope that my books will be readable for someone else when I'm done with them. I don't know if like a charity shop would even accept something like this. This is not good. I'm disappointed in myself. That's it. We're done. That is it. That took a long time to write and prepare for and film. I'm glad that I liked it as much as I did because I'm excited for the next book. Like I said in the beginning, I expected subconsciously, I expected them to be much less enjoyable than this one than it was. Okay, I went a bit too far off script here and felt a little rambly, so I'll summarize. Though I enjoyed this book, I have failed to become emotionally invested in any of the characters. It is glaringly obvious because I am in the middle of reading another series, which I am all the way invested in. I am hilt deep into the story and all the characters, and it's not an altogether pleasant experience. So in one way, I'm relieved that I'm not feeling that way about this story yet. It is early days. There's plenty of time, plenty of opportunity to develop all of those emotions later on. I do hope that they develop within the next 2 books because I want to feel some motivation to buy the next set of 3. We'll see. Time will tell. Thank you so very much for watching to the end if you're still with me. I don't think a lot of you will be. I would be thrilled to have you back for my next video. If you like this video, then you feel free. Well, you're very welcome to leave a like and subscribe for more content, both in my vocabulary series and eventual live streaming. Sometime soon, I hope. We'll see. I'll try to figure it out. And until then, have a fantastic rest of your day. We'll have to. I'm still new. I don't really know how to start or end. I'll settle on something eventually, I'm sure. So anyway, take care. Bye. I really should start filming earlier in the day. It's 2 a.m. already. And I'm tired. I'm really tired. I really should start filming earlier in the day because it's 2 a.m. right now. I mean, it's kind of strategic because I have children, or no, I don't. My upstairs neighbors have children, and they can tend to, when they run around, it's like the ceiling is coming down. So I want to avoid that. So I film after they go to filming after they go to sleep. I don't know if I was super attentive toward the end. We'll see when in the edit, as always. But then I have if I'm going to live stream, I have to decide which audience I want to target, right? Which is very difficult when you don't have an audience. I mean, should I go for the Americans? There are more of them, or my fellow Europeans. But I don't even know who would be, if any, would be interested in my live streams. I guess it will depend how willing I am to stay up late or get up early. Who will be awake when? Who will have the ability to watch a stream when? I don't know. How am I supposed to know that? I just have to try it, I guess. Enough babbling. I'll let you go. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Bye.